Are you missing a mic?
Maybe. Does it look like it or no?
It kind of does.
I think I
Over
saw
there.
one from here, but I could use one over there.
Yeah, take that if you need it,
Okay.
because while Chief is here, no one sits on this side of Laura. And yeah, you're fine. In fact, it must have been moved.
I borrowed it to try to tie into the PA system for our ceremony, but the old PA system wasn't working, so then I used that blue mic that we used to see here. the big kind of
Yeah,
mount.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. All right, I'm gonna get a pen. Okay.
There's nights where
got nothing.
I was attending. Okay.
We're all ready, and seeing it's ready, I will call to order the regular meeting of the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors for Tuesday, June 6th. And the first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, if we could all rise. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lisa, I'm sorry, I think that the volume cut out in the room.
Okay, Patty, can you hear me now? Patty, can you hear me? You can now? Okay, thank you. All right, we'll go to Centrise Martin for announcements.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to members of the board, staff, and the public for joining us this evening for the June 6th regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors. This meeting has been properly advertised in accordance with the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act as a hybrid meeting with the option to attend virtually and in person here in the main meeting room. If you are in attendance virtually using the Zoom platform and wish to speak on behalf of an agenda item, please say your name, municipality of residence, and the topic you wish to speak on when the chairwoman calls on you. If you are attending in person with us in the main meeting room and wish to speak on behalf of an agenda item, please address the board at the podium and state your name, municipality of residence, and the topic you wish to speak on. And prior to commencing the meeting, I have a few short procedural items to cover. First, members of the public attending using the Zoom platform are asked to remain muted during the meeting to prevent any ambient noise from disrupting the meeting. If a member of the public is acknowledged by the chair, they may unmute their microphone for their question or comment. Secondly, board members are asked to indicate their name when motioning or seconding a motion so that the minutes may accurately reflect the action taken. And finally, a roll call of the Board of Supervisors will now be taken to ensure that all members can hear and interact using the Zoom meeting platform. Please indicate that you are here when your name is called. Ms. Strickland?
Here.
Ms. Stevens?
I'm here.
Mr. Thompson?
Here.
Mr. Gracie Griffin?
Here.
Ms. Deneni?
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Up next is public input, an opportunity for anyone in the public to comment on any item not currently on tonight's agenda. And if you could make your way up to the podium and give us your name and your township of residence.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? That's good. My name's Renee Hoover. I am in Ferguson Township. My son attends the elementary school. We live just down the road. I've been living here about 11 years now, and I am the new farmers market manager for our Pine Grove Mills Farmers Market that I hope you'll all be attending on Thursday. I wanted to come and offer an update for you. And first, I wanted to offer a thank you for the funds that you provided for the market. This is our 6th year that we're going into, and the market has done really well in the beginning. And we've hit a few little bumps the last couple of years with COVID and some other things, so we can definitely use your support. But we're so thankful that you've chosen to continue to support us. It's very, very helpful. Just to give you a few different updates. Opening day is on Thursday. We're very excited. We almost have a full house with vendors. We have new vendors popping out of the woodwork, and we're getting a lot of excitement. We might actually be completely full at some point, but it's looking good. We have 5 to 6 different produce vendors, 4 meat vendors, a dairy vendor, coffee, meat, wine, beer. A really big variety. We are also the only local market that accepts SNAP benefits, which is a great thing for the local area when we're advertising that pretty heavily for the local community. Opening day, in addition to the vendors, we also have 2 food trucks coming. We're hoping to have food trucks every week. In addition to that, the SCLO Library is doing a story time for us. We have a face painter, we have music, so we're really gonna knock it out that evening and have a great time, encouraging people to stay and meet their neighbors and interact with the public, interact with each other. So vendors is looking good. I'd encourage you guys as leaders of the community to, if you know people who are, vendors at other markets, other places, send them our way. The other thing I'd encourage is that we need more volunteers, and that is on our steering committee that makes decisions, as well as volunteers to set up and break down. We have a lot of volunteers. We could always use extra hands to help with that. That would be fantastic. The third thing is marketing. And so at this time, I will not be offended if you all get out your phones and look up Pine Grove Mills Farmers Market on Facebook and PGM, I think it's PGM Farmers Market on Instagram, and follow us right now. That would be really important. And also follow our newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter by going to our webpage, Pine Grove Mills Farmers Market. Sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get that every week during the season. This is important because as leaders, I really hope you guys could share the posts that we're making. Share them with your constituents. Encourage people to get out there. In the center region, we're so lucky to be surrounded by these great farms and these great businesses. As you know, farmers markets are a small business incubator. They help the local economy. So we really don't want to see it go. And I know numbers were very low last year. So, I feel like some of the vendors did not want to return. quite honestly, but we've gotten a lot of vendors to replace them, and a lot of continued vendors that are supporting our market. Some of the vendors only come to our market. So, if we were to leave, they wouldn't have necessarily a place to have their business, because their farm is closer to us on our end of town. Some of the other farmers markets are full in terms of vendors they can accept. And it's nice for people to have a farmer's market any day of the week that they can go to, to get different things. Different vibes are at the different farmers markets, different vendors. So they're really a different feel. So we don't compete with them. We just want to have availability for everybody during the week to have a farmer's market if they want to attend. And again, we're the only one that accepts SNAP benefits, which is really a great benefit to the local community. So please follow us on social media. Please share our posts. Please think about people who might want to volunteer, or if you want to volunteer. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to share. We have these great posters you'll see around town. We're sending out a postcard. We're doing a lot of social media. So that's why this year is really key. We really need to get the customers out. So if you have ideas for that, you can let me know now. You can send me an email. You can contact us on Facebook. I also want to introduce Pastor Paul Tomkiel. His church hosts the farmers market, and he is the chair, I believe, of the steering committee. Co-chair. So he, donates a lot of his time to helping the farmers market, and so do his church members. So, as well as other people in the community. So we really appreciate that. I'm happy to answer any questions about the market or any ways you might help.
Thank you so much. Questions?
Yeah.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you. I'm a founding member of the market. I'm sure you've heard a lot about me.
I have heard your name, yes.
Yep. So I just wanted to say thank you and good luck this season.
Thank you. Please come out and support us. If you guys don't shop there, then it's hard to convince other people to. Bring your kids, bring your family, share us when you can.
Just a follow-up comment. I think when I left just last year, it was the budget was, I won't reveal the amount, but it was in very healthy shape. So I'm just encouraged by that and hoping for sustainability of that market.
Great.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
I
it.
wanted to mention that your very own Patrice Martin is ringing the opening bell at the market on Thursday at 1 p.m. So that'll be exciting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I do serve on the steering committee as well, and appreciate you coming tonight, so thank you. Okay, any other comments for the public input time? I see one on Zoom. Yep, you can unmute. Is that Rhonda?
Yes.
Go ahead and give us
Hi.
your name and your township of residence.
Should I go ahead?
Yeah, please, thank you.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Well, I could hear you, Rhonda, but I don't know about the room.
Can you hear me?
We can hear
I
you.
can hear you on Zoom. This is Rhonda.
I can
Yes.
hear you on Zoom.
We can hear you, so you can go
Okay.
ahead.
Can the board hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes,
We're working on
okay,
whatever
yes,
audio
okay.
issue. Thank you.
So thank you for your time. I'm Rhonda Stern, and I live on North Butt Street in State College on Ferguson Township. For 33 years, I've lived there. And I know there's a lot going on in the township, but I wanted to bring up a concern I have for our neighborhood. And in order to maintain like good neighborhood character, I want to discuss the house property. Our neighborhood has been very safe, and I'm hoping to maintain that sense of safety and comfort during this time of transition with all the changes going on with the TSD process and the new buildings that are going up. The house property is 3 acres or so located right next to our homes. And in 2000,
I'm sorry, Rhonda, if you could pause for a second. I can. That's going on the CNET video right now. Can we take a minute? Rhonda, you're going off tape because we're having some tech issues. Just thank you.
okay,
Is it,
Can you hear us?
can you hear us okay?
yes.
Thank you. I don't mean, yeah,
Okay, just let me know when to start.
Squared away, thanks. We're good, Ronnie, go ahead, please, thanks.
Okay, you heard the first part.
Yes.
Okay, so in 2020, there was a very, very helpful agreement, helpful for our neighborhoods, made between the Ferguson Township Board and the Borough of State College. And there's two letters that I'd like to refer to. These are in documents that are able to be found in the I guess the minutes of the township. So the first one is from Ferguson Township Chairman Stephen Miller to Mr. Jesse Barlow, who is the Borough Council President. And I realize Steve Miller is no longer the chairman. The first is dated July 16th. I'm sorry, let me get these right. Okay, the first was dated April 29th. So I'm just going to read a little section from it. And it was April 29th, 2020. And Stephen Miller wrote the fourth paragraph down. The Board of Supervisors decided that in order to preserve the quality of the life of residents of the West College community, we no longer would temporarily allow uses that weren't specifically allowed in the TSD zoning district or in a spirit consistent with the nature of the district. So up until that time, from the time house was torn down until this time, there were various staging areas that were set up there, which was quite challenging for those of us living right next to it. So in this letter, it says a construction laydown yard, a heavy freight transfer and resting place is not a use allowed in the TSD and is not consistent with the spirit of the TSD, which is a walkable mixed-use corridor of commercial and residential, whose character is maintained by a rigorous design manual. So that's the section from this letter that is relevant, but there's a lot more in the letter. But in that letter, he is writing to the borough saying that not only would Ferguson Township stop allowing that to be used as a staging area, but he was making a request that the borough would work hand in hand with the Ferguson Township. So in the letter that was a response to Stephen Miller's letter from Jesse Barlow, there is a couple sentences that say the State College Planning Department has put Penn State on notice that the continued use of this site for a laydown area will not be approved after the expiration of the permit in August 2021. So I am hoping that, by the way, this property is fenced in presently. It's very safe and quiet. And with all the other changes going on, all the building that's going on, the dust and the noise, we're respectfully asking for continued stability in our neighborhood, and to hear that you're honoring our neighborhood by continuing that agreement that was made then, that the house property not be used for a purpose that's inconsistent with the TSD guidelines and consistent with honoring our neighborhood. So I'd like, I'm trying to do this proactively, and I really appreciate your time and further consideration to maintain our neighborhood in the West College area, and especially on Butt Street and Gulfview. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Rhonda, for bringing that and the reminder of that. Did somebody have a comment? No.
Well, I mean, I recall that, and I remember, that it was a great instance of, I thought, multi-municipal cooperation to really uplift the residents and the desire for safe and, mostly safe neighborhoods in the pedestrian and other kinds of ways. So, I think it's zoning is happening with
Yeah.
that. Other board members will be here. I don't know if you were on the board. Hattie was, I don't know if she remembers that.
Yeah.
If I were on the board, I would be continuing that. I think that's a good policy, if that's what you're interested in, a comment.
Yeah, good. All right, thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, Rhonda. Appreciate your comments
Thank you.
and patience as we work through the technical difficulty. I
Thank
think
you.
that's resolved now, so they can all hear us. Okay. Any other public input at this time? I don't see any, so if you want to, yes.
It'll be less than 3 minutes, very likely. You and Centuries could share this. I just made a couple copies because I don't like to waste paper, but I didn't want people scrambling, and usually people are here in person, but not tonight, so that's my luck. For those online, I'm just going to refer to the Pine Grove Mill Small Area Plan, so that's nothing new to anybody. I just figured I'd come up, it's not on the agenda, so just for clarity. I am still a board member, but Laura Giannini, Ferguson Township. Yeah, I forgot my glasses though, so I'm sorry, I actually can't see a thing without them, so I'm just gonna walk back for a second here. Sorry, don't dock my time. Oh, they're on my head, okay, so it's good, it's caught on tape. All right, so I'm just going to refer to page 27 of the Pine Grove Mill Small Area Plan for the large and any Ferguson Township. For those of you that don't know, the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan was completed in 2019, and it was a really amazing effort of individuals in that general vicinity. Many on the committee, so only some are here tonight, but there are several of us here tonight. Anyway, what I'm referring to is under the Pine Grove Mills a Vibrant Community on page 27. You can find goal 7, the promotion and funding of tourist-oriented destinations signage. And under that, an action, 2 actions. Identify the attractions that would benefit from Todd's signage, and identify funding for Todd's signage. So the reason I just wanted to point that out to folks is there was a recent conversation, as supervisors, we're asked to comment on a lot of policy issues. And I think I might have perhaps been misunderstood on a certain policy issue that came before us. It's not on the agenda tonight, so that's why I'm up here tonight. So I had helped write a grant to acquire some funding for Todd's signage. And at some point, a person who's not a board member, but who has significant relationship with the board, said to me that, to put it softly, she was confused by my policy stance on the funding for a police reader of license plates, stationary reader of license plates, because she had perceived that my policy position was the reason I didn't support that funding was because, just simply because the board wasn't asked. So that wasn't my totality of my policy stance, but nonetheless, the reason I'm just wanting to speak to this small area plan is what was concerning to me is that the idea of, it was really a false dichotomy because, here in this plan, the supervisors have all approved this plan. This is a written plan, and even if the timing isn't exactly right for these items, these other items were not in another plan. So even if it were that kind of a policy, policy decision solely relying on one aspect, it really wouldn't be the permission aspect. It really wouldn't be the permission aspect, but if it were, it's kind of relevant that the board has seen this document and we go by it, right? And, you know, Lisa, you were involved with writing that grant. In fact, you had I think the Google document that we shared was initiated by you. So, again, I'm just saying, like, you know, it was said not in a public forum. I want other board members to be really clear that, like, I never would have written that grant had it not been in this book. I know I'm covering a lot of territory about that. There's quite a nest of things there. I would not have written that grant with you. You and I would not have written that grant had it not been in here. Okay, I'm sure of it. Nonetheless, it was still a bit of a false dichotomy set up there. And I didn't agree policy-wise with what was to be implemented in the township. So I appreciate your time. Let me clarify that.
Okay, thank you. Any other public input?
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, moving on to approval of the minutes, and we have one set of minutes from May 15th. We can get a motion to approve.
This is Patty, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any corrections or comments on that? If none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Thank you. And next up is authorities, boards, and commissions reports with the State College Borough Water Authority report. And Mr. Ford Stryker, your report is attached. Is there anything you wanted to highlight or share with us from that?
Thanks, Lisa. Good evening, everyone. No, I don't really have anything special to report. I just wanted to tune in and see if the supervisors of the board had anything you'd like me to convey back to the authority.
Thank you. Okay, questions or comments to Ford? I'm not seeing any. Thanks so much.
All right. Yep, have a great evening.
Thank you. You too. Okay, moving on to special reports and acknowledgements. Under Diversity, Equity, and Inclusionary Initiatives and Acknowledgements, we have National Caribbean American Heritage Month, Pride Month, Immigrant Heritage Month. Administrative offices are closed for Juneteenth on 6/19. And then we have the Center Region Council of Governments DEI training, and Patty and Jeremy were going to offer some comments on that event.
Thank you, Lisa. No, it was a great training that COG had organized for us. It was conducted by the Center Region Anti-Bias Coalition, and we went through a series of activities and discussions, and it was really wonderful, and I loved the networking and talking about ideas and a policy sort of, thinking outside the box with some other municipalities. And anyway, it was just a great experience, and if you get an opportunity, or we have an opportunity, I would encourage everyone to attend that as well. Jeremy, I don't know if you have anything to add.
I was going to say you covered it all. One thing that kind of stood out to me was I think there was a lot of ideas of just kind of being able to get people in the neighborhood together to get to know their neighbors and just kind of interact with people that they may not necessarily speak with on a daily basis. So
That's great. All right, well, thank you both for attending and sharing that. And moving on, the next item under environment, we have the annual training on Ferguson Township's municipal separate storm sewer system, or MS4, presentation by Aaron Jolin.
Good evening, my name is Aaron Dolan. I'm the Ferguson Township Stormwater
Good, thanks, Erin.
Good. Okay. James, I'm gonna try to share my screen. This is the Ferguson Township Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Program Annual Review. It's our stormwater management program review. We are required to do this annually and as part of our MS4 permit. And this is essentially a presentation of the basics on our MS4 permit. And you are welcome to provide feedback or questions. Normally I would include this presentation with our stormwater management program with the board packet. However, this is my first year and I accidentally did not do that, so this is going to be made available tomorrow. And feel free, again, to reach out to me if you have questions or provide written responses or any comments you have. So the written MS4 stormwater program is an 18-page narrative. And essentially, this year, we are going to follow essentially the same template that's been used, which was established by Ron for the following year. Very little changing, but just a few words and small updates. NPDS is the program required it's required as part of Ferguson Township's NPDS Phase 2 MS4 permit. NPDS stands for the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. NPDES was created as an amendment to the Clean Water Act of 1972. It establishes a permit program to control pollution by regulating the discharge of pollutants into the waters of the United States. MS4 again stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, not a mouthful at all. Generally speaking, the MS4 permit mostly deals with management of our everyday health and activities in our urban area stormwater systems. Ferguson Township has had an MS4 permit since 2003, and this permit was most recently renewed and effective as of July 1st, 2020, and expires June 30th of 2025. Here you see a very brief, this is one of the most important processes on Earth, the hydrologic cycle. If any of you have ever studied it, it's rather remarkable. We're going to kind of focus in on the area in red. And just to give you some quick facts, stormwater runoff volumes and peak rates from developed and urban areas are significantly greater than when the area is undeveloped. And in the Susquehanna Basin, which is the Chesapeake Bay, which is where we drain to, development constitutes approximately 9% of the drainage area, where stormwater pollution to the Chesapeake Bay is approximately 17% of the pollution load. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of how much or how important it is to regulate stormwater. Stormwater runoff is often responsible for downstream degradation, erosion of streams, conveying harmful pollutants like fertilizer, pet waste, chemical contaminants, and trash. And like I said, the permit, or MS4 permit, is focused on the stormwater systems in the urban area here. Here's the urbanized area from 2000 and 2010 with an overlay. As you can see in the lower left-hand corner, this is all the MS4 partners. Ferguson Township, you see the areas in orange and blue. It's anticipated that that will probably change again in 2020. There will probably be some additional areas added. And an example of that was last year, or for this permit cycle, Spring Township was added to
MS4 partners. Still an area that's growing, so we'll probably see additional urbanized area. One area I can think of is the development over on the south side of Whitehall Road, student housing, so that will probably get added at some point. As I stated earlier, MS4 permit regulates, at least for now, only the surface waters and the stormwater in the urban area. So for context here, you can see there's a purple line shown. Those are the National Hydraulic Data Set streams in Ferguson Township. In blue, you see the names of the sub-watersheds. You see Big Hollow, Beaver Branch, and Slab Cabin. And in yellow highlights is the drainage area. Now, one really unique thing about Ferguson and the Center region in general, you can see in pink, these are some of the known karst features that are within Ferguson Township or Radio Park, which is just outside. And so the karst features in this area take an awful lot of stormwater. And so we don't have the typical wet streams that you would see in other areas of Pennsylvania. As we regulate our outfalls that go to these channels and then to the sinkholes, not only are we protecting surface water, but we're also protecting the groundwater that feeds Spring Creek and that we drink. So while it is only regulating surface waters, it's also important that we're regulating all of the, we're not letting it get into our groundwater supply either. And as the board knows, there's a wellhead protection ordinance which also encompasses, I think, the entire township. So you've done a great job of trying to protect these resources. So our permit requires essentially 6 minimum control measures. And in addition to that, we have to have a stormwater management ordinance. For the current permit cycle, the township also adopted a PRP, or pollution reduction plan, and we must reduce urban area pollutants by 10% for the permit period. We have to submit an annual report that basically states we've met all the requirements of the permit. And just as another note, a lot of our MCMs, our control measures, are completed in accordance with our MS4 partners, in coordination with College Township, Harris Township, Patton Township, Penn State University, the Borough State College, and Spring Township. So it's a collaborative group. The 6 minimum control measures are listed here. We'll go through each one a little bit in brief, but they include public education and outreach, public involvement and participation, illicit discharge detection and elimination, construction site stormwater site runoff management, post-construction stormwater management, and pollution prevention and good housekeeping. MCM1, the Public Education and Outreach Plan, or PEOP. You can see the BMPs that we utilize to essentially meet the requirements of our PEOP. Basically this is used to educate and inform the property owners, residents, contractors, visitors, anybody who is coming in contact with or responsible for generating stormwater. And so the purpose of this plan is to include all those affected. We send out newsletters, brochures, there's posters and maps. On the slide, you see the ad that was posted in the CDT this spring in March 19, 2023. Over along the side there, if you want to take a look, is the poster that we post in our lobby, along with the map of Spring Creek, which is also is in the form of a brochure out in the lobby. Again, these are the PEOP strategies, newsletters. We have the brochure for stormwater pollution prevention with all zoning permits, the poster of the Spring Creek watershed map, several fact sheets. One on here is the storm drain stenciling program, which is yet to be implemented. However, we have been working on that. We anticipate that would probably get implemented, or we'll come to the board with a plan, at least for implementation, sometime within the year. MCM2 is Public Involvement and Participation Plan. There are various, these are basically the ways that we notify people of the opportunities that there are for involvement. As you can see, we have a plan that basically spells out what we do. We have a target audience identification, primarily the residents. We send out educational materials and Track Who Gets It, and we send out education material to target audiences and Track Who Gets That as well. Example of that might be that we will contact landscapers sometime in the future to basically tell them about the nutrient, the laws in Pennsylvania that require, that you cannot put, they regulate the fertilizer that you put on your lawns, which is one of the big polluters. PIPP strategies, we have legal notices of the public meetings that were published. We have the CDT MS4 advertisements. We do some optional press releases. We have the Ferguson Township website, the MS4 Partners website, and then we also notify through newsletters. And for our PIPP, or our public, for the public participation plan, there are several different ways that you've probably all heard about. There's Watershed Cleanup Day that's conducted by Clearwater. There's the Rain Barrel Workshop that is completed by Clearwater as well. And then there's a Water Resources Monitoring Project, which is, I can post the website for you. It's essentially looking at pollutant loading in Spring Creek. Again, we're going to be introducing the Storm Drain Stenciling Project. We also have Adopt a Highway, which updates are currently underway for. Sorry about the slide. We conduct this public meeting, and we will conduct more public meetings to develop our ordinance when those changes are required for stormwater, as well as we go forward with our PRP development, which is our pollution reduction plan development. MCM3 is illicit discharge detection and elimination. As you all are aware, we had kind of an incident this year on the west end in one of our urban areas where oil spilled into the stream. And so that's a great example. If that would have been one of the projects that we had completed as part of our PRP plan, we would have been responsible for reporting that as an illicit discharge. As it was discharged to a stream and not through our MS4 system. Therefore, the DEP had jurisdiction over that. But essentially, there's a very large push to make sure that we are emphasizing and detecting, making sure that we do not have things getting into our storm drain system that aren't supposed to be there. The only thing that is supposed to be there is essentially precipitation. But however, there are other things that get in there through the precipitation, which is the whole purpose of this program. But really avoiding oil, trash. One that we are going to have to add this year is car washing. Cannot discharge car washing that has any kind of detergent into it to the storm drain system. You can wash your car in the grass as long as the runoff does not go into the storm drain system. But their pool water needs to be dechlorinated and discharged to a grassy area. It can't go directly into the storm drain system. And so there are several updates that are going to be required to our ordinance, to Chapter 26, to make sure we have appropriately called out what those illicit discharges are. And we will continue to keep our lines open with the community, with the residents, with the board, when we start making those updates. Part of our strategies for maintaining, implementing illicit discharge detection, we maintain a storm sewer map in GIS. We have ordinance which prohibits the illicit discharges, which will also need to be updated in 2024. We do annual dry weather screenings of our outfalls. We investigate complaints, which we get quite a few, I'd say at least once a month. So I've probably done 10 already this year. Then we report and document the illicit discharge and also notify the DEP and then get it cleaned up, of course. Here's an example of one of the pages of our MS4 system map, which is posted on the stormwater, on Ferguson Township's website under the stormwater program. This is one of several pages. This is kind of a blow up of that system map. You can see how comprehensive the information is. You see yellow is PennDOT storm drains. You can see the red is private, and the orange belongs to Ferguson. And what we are, you can see the different inlets on here, pretty comprehensive. Now, it's comprehensive but not perfect. We're in the process of continuing to continually update that. There's a lot of things that we can do to help with efficiency or programming, things like storm drain inlet inspections, our storm drain cleaning program, and storm drain lining. So we're continually focused on updating that system, make sure it's usable so we can efficiently complete some of the programmatic things that we're doing in the township. All right, construction site stormwater runoff management. This is basically erosion and sediment control. And essentially, you can see the BMPs that are utilized here. What the summary of this is we utilize the Center County Conservation District, coordinate with them on any kind of development that is happening, and they are responsible for implementing or requiring any E&S controls as required. We don't issue zoning permits basically until Conservation District has issued their permit approval or said that they don't need a permit. Post-construction stormwater management, I play a pretty large role in this part of it. And again, we are required to implement stormwater. The name's ever changing. We used to call them BMPs. Soon they're going to be called SCMs, or stormwater control measures. So every development, there's literally hundreds of these in the township, and they have various different designs. So right now we're currently going through and we're trying to organize all of those files, understand where all the locations are, and we are required to inspect those facilities once every permit cycle, once every 5 years. And as this is taken from Ron's, I haven't tallied this year's as we've added, but the inventory is 69 sites, 158 BMPs and counting. I can tell you I found quite a few more as we've gone through, so we'll update that for the next presentation. Additionally, as far as the post-construction stormwater ordinance, I do a lot of enforcement. There have been several issues this year with facilities that aren't working, which cause drainage to go onto a neighboring property. So part of my job is to then enforce and make sure that those get corrected. That's the least fun part of my job for sure, but we have been making some progress. So MCM 6 is pollution prevention and good housekeeping for municipal operations, and that primarily deals with what the procedures that we deal in-house with relative to road salting, handling the materials. And so I've been working with our public works crews to develop SOPs, written operation and maintenance programs. A lot of those are in place, but I am helping to update those. One item that will be, we made some progress at is we are actually certifying our street sweeping materials as clean fill now, or we will be doing that. That way we can have a program in place so that that could be potentially counted in the future as part of our pollution reduction plan. Our pollution reduction plan, the objective, and I think as you're all aware, you sat through a board presentation of sort of what the projects were this past January. And so this is going to be a little bit more brief, but essentially what we're required to do for everybody is implement PCMs, which are pollution control measures, to produce tangible improvements to the quality of stormwater discharges in the Chesapeake Bay watershed and impaired local waterways. They're the plan components. We describe the planning area, evaluate the pollution loading, and then we propose PCMs to reduce the pollutants. All right. Some highlights. The plan that is currently in place was completed by a consultant in coordination with our MS4 partners. We used a program called MapShed to complete our pollution loading modeling. And basically that has some advantages as we get additional credits for certain pollution, PCMs that we implement. That is why we came down to installing stream restoration projects as part of our plan. And again, we are required to design, obtain easements, permitting, and construction of these PCMs within this permit cycle, which is June 2025. Again, for those who aren't aware, here's the PRP planning areas and project locations. Project locations are rather small, but you can see Ferguson Township's study area And what turned out to, there's some interesting, we'll get into in the next slide, but really the 4 projects that we're focused on are all near Pine Grove Mills. One is in Piney Ridge, one is in Pine Grove Mills. The other project that we still have an opportunity to do is Penn State Duck Pond project. That project is complete. However, we can still participate in that project, and that will, we'll have more discussions on this later, sometime in one of the December board meetings as this moves forward. Just for the good of the order, I will point out that you can see the different loadings, and one thing that's interesting about this, and I'll go back to the karst topography, but if you look at Spring Creek, which is Big Hollow watershed, you can see Spring Creek and Big Hollow is divided by the blue line to the north. So the majority of Ferguson Township's urban area is in the Big Hollow watershed. Now, when you look at the pollution loading, if you see here Spring Creek, which is Big Hollow, you look at our base load, it's 146,000 pounds per year. Okay, so if you compare that to Slab Cabin or Beaver Branch, those values are much higher. And the reason is because Big Hollow rarely generates surface flows to Spring Creek. Most of that water is sucked up by karst topography. So because of that, when you do your pollution loadings, those values are significantly less. It's about 0.2% of what's required based on the other studies, and because of the sinkholes in the karst topography. So just wanted to point that out. That's a kind of interesting anomaly with our permit. So here are the PCM locations that were essentially called out in the PRP plan. You can see these are the 2 primary projects. And we have been making some progress on those preliminary designs. You will see an agenda item later for preliminary design and getting some help from a consultant so that we can get these projects done. We have kind of laid out a schedule for the next 2 years so that we can get them done. And again, it looks like if everything goes according to plan, we would be back in front of the board sometime in December to present some of these findings and kind of make a final decision on how to proceed with final design. That may include doing all of Slab Cabin Run, part of Slab Cabin Run, and the Duck Pond, and then all or part of Beaver Branch. And again, for everybody, this is called out wrong, but this is also a Slab Cabin project. This is the Duck Pond project, and Ferguson Township can receive up to 70.5% of the credit, which would be about 20,000 pounds per year. And the, I guess, cost for that, as well as future maintenance costs, will be shared with you at some point, but it's still on the table as far as I think as far as staff is concerned. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Is there any questions now?
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thorough presentation. Questions for Aaron? And I can't see the Zoom members right now, so we'll go in the room first.
I have 3 thoughts to share
Yes,
with
go
the
ahead.
board/Aaron. First, I wanted to say thank you for that presentation. I really appreciated your Gestalt overview kind of approach that you took in a couple of the slides. That was very helpful. I think I have 3 things I just wanted to share with the board, public, or staff. The first, I have a question. You don't have to answer it. It's a thought. It hadn't occurred to me before in the 7 times I've heard this type of a presentation until you did that data presentation of the difference between Beaver Branch, Spring Creek, and Slab Cabin. We fund the Spring Creek Watershed Monitoring Project through Clearwater.
Correct.
And I was just noticing, and from what you were saying about the surface, subsurface water interaction, so when you're trying to apply that data in a generalized way, are those data from Spring Creek significantly kind of like a lower indicator than the watersheds as a whole? because of that phenomena. Don't answer it, no need to answer it, it's a thought. I don't know if that's how it works, unless you want to answer it. You certainly are welcome to, but it may be big,
Well,
so.
what I'll just mention is
Yeah.
the data for that comes from Penn State.
Yeah.
Penn State essentially has a gauge over in the Big Hollow. And so if you can reiterate your question if I'm not answering it, but basically they provided the information and they've essentially calculated based on the actual flows that get there. That's how they apply the map shed pollution load, and then they divide it by the flows that should get there with the flows that actually get there to get that 0.2% of the flows getting there. Now, it doesn't mean the flows don't get there somehow. They all
Yeah.
get there through the groundwater.
I see, okay,
So
I see, okay. Thank you. I'll have to think about that and your response.
Sure.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And then my other two thoughts were, I have heard statistics before, and I think you touched on it. I think people have a perception that it's farmers that use all of the ecocides, some call them herbicides and pesticides. But it's actually homeowners use a much higher amount per pound, per acre. So it's kind of been polled over and over again and keeps showing up. Do we do any education to homeowners about that in particular? Like, it's actually, your lawns are actually, as a whole, responsible for more of this pollutant load than the agricultural runoff that we typically hear folks talk about. Do we do any education in around that particular topic?
The short answer is no right now. I do have some newsletters up my sleeve, and I definitely would like to reach out. As you know, there's a green infrastructure ordinance that was passed. There has been a lot of thought and talk about conversions of basins to natural planted areas, management of invasive species. So there's quite a few things that are kind of in the works, and this first year has been a little bit of a blur. I have to apologize, but it's all, in the mixer right now, and definitely I agree with you. It makes sense to reach out. I don't think many people know about the fertilizer rule that was enacted by Pennsylvania finally, but there are limitations on how much nitrogen you can put on your yard. And to your point, at one time, yards were considered the biggest agricultural crop in the basin, in Chesapeake Bay, and responsible for a lot of the pollution. So now that it has gotten better in a lot of other states, and I think Pennsylvania will also get better. And certainly, it's everything that we do together that contributes, and basically we have to do everything a little bit better.
Yeah, we
But
can all take
I
that.
like your idea. I'd be happy to develop some additional resources, and feel free to, contact me if you have ideas or specific things, so.
Thank you so much. Thank you for entertaining my third and final comment question. And so I have been decluttering in preparing to make space in my home for something else. And in doing so, I'm getting rid of old papers. And I had been interested in stormwater far before I ever became a supervisor. And so I was pulling out old documents and whatnot, and I came across a document from Penn State Stormwater, a beautiful document, multiple pages, and the centerfold is this gorgeous picture of Millbrook Marsh, and a small caption underneath. It's all about stormwater, and it's about how this is our biggest stormwater thing, kind of thing. And at vertical jump, or horizontal jump, we've been talking about Millbrook Marsh Boardwalk, and there's been some discussion about how flow of stormwater has increased through there, and there are a lot of projects, like Eastern Campus projects with stormwater, and then the hospital expansion. And I know it was really significant for us when we did our Public Works building to keep all of our stormwater on site as opposed to just regulating the rate and whatnot. So, big setup to say, it seemed like Penn State was sort of saying, oh, Millbrook Marsh is this place where this flow is happening and we should have expectations of that. And then when we're planning this boardwalk, we're like, we have to have very, very, very strong things. And we're going, why do they have to be so strong? And then I wonder in my layperson mind, is it because it's literally, there's this flow and it's stormwater, and so you get these 100-year events and the climate change and whatnot. The expectation is in our biggest stormwater and most beautiful stormwater basin in the region, the Millbrook Marsh, we should have an expectation of bigger surges. And I think that's what they were saying really decimated the boardwalk in a kind of a faster way than expected, were these surges of large storms. Sorry, it's kind of a conclusion, but the stormwater map you pulled up, where, Millbrook Marsh is at a nexus, I believe, of all of that flow. And so it's just a thought I'm putting out on the table about how this is really to the board, when we're doing that boardwalk, maybe think about it in the context of it being the large stormwater basin, and I can show you guys that document. It was really interesting to me, so, thanks.
That's, you wrapped up many things that could have hours of discussion into that, at least with me. So,
But we won't.
Yes, that a lot of the areas that drain to that area did not have stormwater controls. Most of the borough is like that, and so a lot of big portions of Ferguson. So we have some, I would call them acute measures in place that are sprinkled throughout the basin. But we also, we have a lot of karst features that do gobble up water, and some of my initiatives would include way down the road, but at some point, really finalizing and kind of pinpointing what our pollution loading is. That would take what's called continuous simulation models, and that would really help us pinpoint what our problems are, as well as support what we need to do, versus these macro level programs that we currently use to kind of generate a very generic sort of a model. So to your point though, yes, there's a lot of interesting dynamics that impact Millbrook. I mean, be happy to talk to you anytime about it.
Thank you.
We go over there quite a bit and walk as well and miss the
Thank
boardwalk,
you.
but I think to your point, there's a lot of dynamics there. If you want to share any of those materials, or it'd be,
Great, I'd love to.
See them.
In addition, I'll share, there is, if you would allow, my husband's colleague, he does nonlinear dynamics, and he had a colleague he had introduced me to who then came here to present, probably 6 years ago now, that talked about the dynamics of this specific watershed, and so I'd be happy to introduce you to that individual.
There's a wealth of data out there.
Yeah.
And some of it's disappearing, so yeah, bring it forward.
Yeah.
I mean, part of my job is to pull some of these old studies out and kind of reinvigorate them, because we knew a lot at one time. Some of it's been buried. Some of those things we should probably pull out and dust off and kind of make sure we don't forget about. Good example is like Songbird Sanctuary, right? That's they call that the sponge.
Yeah.
It's a very unique feature. It just handles so much stormwater. So there's, to your point about education, just getting that kind of information out there, putting signage at some point. I think that's all important for the public to understand kind of the unique system here. So all little thought processes in the Tumblr right now.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Sure. Patty, I see your hand raised.
I think I just turned myself off. Sorry. I guess it's been on the whole time. My microphone. Sorry about that. About education. Do you have an idea of when you might do this stenciling? When that program or project might get underway? Because I live in one of the more urbanized sections and would be happy to get that going in my neighborhood.
Sure. I would say sometime within this year. There's quite a few things that we're trying to get out the door and get organized. I've actually reached out and got pricing. There will be some things that I'll probably present questions to the board on how they want to proceed. Initially, they talked about using paint stenciling with stencils and paint. I might propose some other options with markers, which also can be adhered using these pretty simple stickers that peel off, and they have the same, a significantly longer lifespan. One question I'll pose to the board at some point, and so thinking about it now, is, should we have drains to stream, or should we have drains to groundwater supply, or drains to karst feature? that's the unique thing about Ferguson Township. We drain to all different separate features. So, you know, whether we want to kind of really go for education and explain to people what's actually happening, or just do the generic drains to stream, no dumping, you know, really here it's different. It doesn't drain the stream off, but it drains to a karst feature and, you know, to a sinkhole, which then pops up as a spring. So, you know, I don't know. Those are the kind of things that I think it would make sense to bring to the board's attention and see kind of what the thoughts are. But yes, we have reached out and started looking at pricing. And so I would say hopefully, I don't want to commit to anything, Patricia, I'm sorry, but I think hopefully soon, and certainly if the board, you know, directs us, that would become a priority. But we have pulled some information together. It's just there's quite a few things going on right now, so we're making slow, steady progress.
Great, thank you. And Jeremy or Corey? Anything?
It's a great presentation.
Yeah. And I can't see Corey, but Corey, if you have anything, go ahead. Okay, not seeing anything else, so thank you so much. Great presentation. Okay, and now moving on to COG and regional committee reports. Up first was the executive committee, and we've had the general forum meeting since the executive committee met, so you're all familiar with what was in the agenda there. And I did just want to mention at our last meeting, the board directed me to ask the executive committee to put on a future agenda to discuss Millbrook Marsh. And so I did present that, and that was well received, and so that will move forward. What I'm going to do next is send to the chair and the executive director a more succinct list of the specific questions that we had talked about. So what I had was, a discussion on Millbrook Marsh, its relationship to the regional parks, the funding formula, governance structure. Is it a regional park? If not, what's the relationship to other regional park assets like the library and active adult center? And if not a regional park, what funding formula should be applied? What role does the Millbrook Marsh Advisory Committee play in funding operations and governance? What's the relationship of the advisory committee to the Parks Authority and the Parks Agency? I think I covered it, but if there was anything else specific, just let me know and I will include that. And I think the next step will be the executive committee will talk about this and either decide to try to reach some, just to have some discussion there, to either forward to committees, to the municipalities. And so the next step will be more of a planning step on where to have that discussion. So hopefully next month that'll occur. So that's all I had for executive committee. If there's any questions on that.
I just had one thought on the Millbrook.
Mm-hmm.
May or may not be useful. Do we want to ask for a timeline? And I'm only just reflecting to when our authority representative was here, saying they hadn't had I know this is a little bit different what we're talking about, but like my question is like, can we sync up the question of the timeline in respect to these being answered, having a funding strategy, having $11 million, even if there's only 3 points on that timeline, those three.
Okay, yeah. So the timeline of this discussion and the timeline of the discussion of the funding.
Yes.
Okay, yeah,
right.
I think that's good. I'll
Because,
include that.
did I say formula? I didn't mean, the funding plan for Millbrook, and then the implementation of the funding plan, acquisition of funds, and then,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
thanks.
Very good.
That was sort of a gestalt.
Okay, yeah, good, okay. So if anyone thinks of anything else, I can forward that as well too, but I think everyone agreed it's time to have that discussion, so that was good. Okay, and then we have the Parks and Recreation Governance Committee meeting with Patty.
Hi, yeah, not much to report. Our meeting is canceled this month. We will be starting like a work session with the facilitator at the end of July. And that's all there is.
Thanks. Questions for Patty? Okay, and then we had the Land Use and Community Infrastructure Committee. There was a lot of information in that agenda, so if you all want to look through that, there was an update on what's come out of the Center County Affordable Housing Study so far, and then plans for the comprehensive plan update, timelines for community engagement. So a lot of information in that agenda. Questions on that committee? Yes.
I just have two comments. One, it's just on the comp plan process. Jim May's here in the room too, so I can't not say it. There had been an item that was deferred from the Parks comp plan that was a pretty useful item, that was a map of assets, and it's spelled out, I don't need to get into it. There had been some discussion about including that as a section, part, subsection of the comp plan. And you could call it, say, mapping green assets in a very general way. Hopefully in a way that the ArcGIS file, or whatever it's called, can then be used in multiple applications, tourism applications, preservation applications. So it's just a thought. Lucy seems like it would be the place, since that's where the comp plan's rolling through. So just maybe having that conversation. If I know we have other maps in there that are sort of similar, but maybe in this revision, taking a kind of a new, fresh perspective on that and what that might look like.
And probably pulling from what comes out of the active transportation plan too. And, I think that timing will align a little bit, so
Wonderful.
I'll make a note of that, and hopefully Jim will remind me at our next meeting. And
Thank you.
Good, and I'm making a note. Okay, active transportation plan. Okay, any other questions on Lucy? And if not, we'll move to staff reports, and up first is the manager's report.
Madam Chair, provided with the agenda packet is a copy of my manager's report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Okay, questions for the manager? No, seeing none. Public Works Director report.
You will, notice in my report, there's a number of projects that have started, and there are some that will be starting soon.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Modricker? Yes.
I have a couple of things. So I saw PennDOT's continuing its work, or maybe finishing its work on the intersection down there. They did a great job painting those lines. Everybody's really thankful for that. And it seems like maybe though, and maybe this was part of the planned change, but I know they had changed the double yellow line back appropriately to a passing lane, partly one direction and partly another direction on 26 between the intersection of Whitehall and 26 and the new Swoopy T intersection. There had been passing lane both directions. It got double yellow line painted again. So I wonder, because there's those farms down there, and so that passing zone there is actually, when those farm things are there, is sort of extra helpful. Sort of a signal of like, here's a better place to go around them. I just wondered if that's something that they intended, or if they can change it back again to passing. So it was passing, then they made it double, and then it was passing, and now it's double, I think is.
And the location again is between where and where?
Yeah, it's between what used to be, part of Harner, now is Harner Farm-ish corner, and the new light intersection.
Oh, going
Used to be
down
the
the
Y.
Ron, do you have a good update on that?
Thank
We have
you.
Ron Seibert, our traffic engineer. He might have the most recent information.
Thank you. All of my stuff is traffic, so you could stay up there.
Yeah, I'll let you know what I know. So PennDOT is looking at in the process of doing a study on that to eliminate the passing zone to improve safety. There's actually concerns with the number of driveways in that segment with left-turning vehicles getting T-boned by someone trying to pass them, either going up or down the hill. So that no passing zone will likely remain as permanent in that section of roadway.
All right. The other thing, I just wondered if it was intentional to have the, and this is a while back, but this is a kind of, it's cycling season again, so now we're seeing some cycling questions. If it was intentional also about passing zone to have the centerline rumble feature in the passing portion on Whitehall Road, not on the double yellow line portion. Because it used to be, I knew you should skip there. It used to be that rumble, it was worn down, but it hadn't been in the passing area. And then when we put it, just the recent new paving, it was put in the passing area. Was that intentional?
Yes.
Last comment, this is a thought. Again, cycling season, you can stay up there. Yep. And this is like kind of a different thing. I just have been, you know, you guys probably hate strong towns because they give us all these ideas of what we could do. And Whitehall Road, you know, there's a lot of cyclists out there and we mutually coexist. I mean, those poor folks with those lagoon drainer trucks are out there, you feel for them, right? But nonetheless, there is a lot of car and cycling interaction out there. Did we ever think about making, or does the state have this option for us to partake in, of some kind of a note of where the 4-foot cushion falls into the roadway? So what I'm saying is, so for example, on Whitehall, and you have the double yellow line and the passing zone all has the rumble strip, the rumble, centerline rumble, and you've got the cyclist, and they can be anywhere on the road. Legally, they're allowed to be anywhere on the road. And I'm asking that as a question. Is that correct? They are. But typically, they're to the right of the white line. And I wonder if there's any kind of thing like a 4-foot measurement from that white line, like here's where 4 feet into the road is, that anybody ever does on these very popular bikeways to help everybody figure out like, oh, there's the white line, here's 4 feet from that. If a cyclist is on the other side of that, we know we're safe if we're over here. Like as a guide to help people? Is there anything like that?
I'm going to say, excuse me, that I don't know that there's a guide, but if your travel lane is 10 foot wide and your shoulder is 4 feet wide, if the bike happened to be in the center of that 4-foot bike area and your car was in the center or closer to the center of the road, you're going to have about that 4 feet.
So if I just barely touch the rumble strip with my tire, that's about 4 feet.
Yeah,
That's what I think.
Ron, do you want to answer it differently or better?
No, you're spot on. Yeah, so a lot of it just really does depend upon where the cyclist chooses to ride.
Right.
I've never seen an offset line in the middle of the travel lane.
Because it just confuses people.
That's
We
not a
don't-
standard marking, it's probably not something that we would want to entertain or go there, because it could create driver confusion and we might accept some liability.
Right.
But Dave is correct, if a cyclist is essentially riding in the middle of the shoulder, and a vehicle is in the travel lane and shies towards the double yellow, they will get that 4-foot buffer.
Great, thanks.
Can't say the same for an oversized vehicle. They would like to
Yes.
encroach into the oncoming lane.
All kinds of stuff happening out there with the oversized.
For
so that's-
95% of the vehicles that travel on that road, it would not be an issue.
Yep,
Now, if
okay.
a cyclist is driving in the lane and
Yeah.
not in the shoulder, then that's obviously a different story.
Right.
Yeah. I think it was more of kind of like, this, again, every year, this time of year, there's interactions, and it helps to just reiterate some of these kinds of things and thoughts. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. That's it.
All right. Other questions? Public Works? Okay, thank you. And next is the Planning and Zoning Director report, which was attached. Anything to add from Ms. Wargo?
I don't have anything to add unless the board has questions.
Questions for Jenna?
I have this for Jenna because it was a traffic study, but maybe it's actually for Ron, and I apologize. I assumed it was with like a land development plan, but that could be a false assumption, so I apologize. Just the one question is, the device that I got the response on, is that something that was PennDOT, it belonged to PennDOT and it's for them, or it's like part of a land development, or that was part of our budget? I always thought we car counted with those black things over the road, ba-bump.
Right, these
Is
were.
that new?
Right, this is in reference to the devices
Yeah.
that were posted
Yeah.
on traffic signals in a couple of different areas.
I'll answer it in simple terms, and if you need something more complicated, Ron will get up here. So, long ago, we stood there and you saw people with their thumbs using counters to count cars making movements as part of a traffic study to support a traffic impact study for a land development plan. So people did it. Now it's more robotics, and you see a device or a camera on a pole, and that is counting and recording vehicles making turning movements. And that device transmits down to a data collector, which is the box. And the pole, to make it stable, is attached to a post in the ground, like a signpost. And the data collector is usually chained and locked to that post. So that's what you're seeing. They're usually owned by consultants that are hired by a developer to do a study.
So the only information they're recording then is the number of cars that go through there? Sorry,
Yeah,
Ron.
we will record the number of vehicles and the type of vehicle, so it also classifies as a heavy vehicle or just a passenger car.
Gotcha.
Because that's important in traffic flow analysis, and then the direction that they're coming from and going to, yeah.
And you'll see a video if you need to look back on it for a visual aid.
The township did that a couple of years ago when we did a multi-way stop study at the intersection of Cherry Lane and Martin Street, if you recall. We hired a consultant to come in, they put the camera up and provided the video and all the training accounts instead of us doing that manually.
And then that's proprietary information that they
Told them they paid.
Because again, from our standpoint, our goal is not to get down to the penny, but to have a reasonable cost estimate. Because we know I may keep the temperature in the apartment at 65, you may choose to keep it at 68. The number of temperature days this year may be warmer or colder. It's not going to be perfect, but the idea is we're trying to get some measure of cost of rental so that folks truly understand what they're putting themselves into.
And again, I absolutely understand the
Yep.
intent, and I agree with it. I think it's needed. I don't know what a better way to get the information is at this point.
And I will tell you this, we have a possibility that if this is an onerous or a difficult problem to deal with, the board always has the option to basically pass an ordinance to pull one piece out of this. We can cherry pick it out if it is a problem. And quite honestly, if we see it as a problem, we would let, the region know, because regionally, we're seeing this going in.
Dave, go ahead.
A thought, if the landlord can get the kilowatt usage for the year or for the month from the power company, can't they do a reasonable estimate based on cost per kilowatt and some assumed, transmission charges so that they could just give a reasonable estimate? If you're asking the landlord to do it, if that seemed a more viable solution. I'm just new to the conversation
Yeah.
and offering it as a
I
thought.
appreciate it.
And that is truly an option from the landlord's side. We also know that based on my discussions with West Penn Power, is going to take some, how should I say, some doing for the landlord to call West Penn Power and get that information from West Penn Power. So again, it's really a question of where do you want to invest your time and effort. But again, it's up to you as to how you want this done. We're trying to look at it as, attempting to do a balanced situation.
Yeah. So then if the tenant, so there would also be a fine imposed on the landlord if the tenant wasn't provided the information.
So, correct. If the
Okay.
landlord going forward didn't provide prospective tenants with that information, then at that point in time, the landlord could be found, in violation of the code.
And then this would not take effect, that, the landlord provision of it would not take effect for 2 years because you need, okay. And is that, and I didn't see that in there.
It's not in there, but
Okay.
again, so what we start getting into is if, and this is, I'm gonna ask kind of an odd thing, and it's rhetorical, but there's some things that we need to be able to use judgment. If not, we can write a book on, hey, this doesn't take effect for this long and so on and so forth, but it becomes very clunky to write half the provision that takes place right now to get all the information, and then, say this half of the provision starts taking place in 2 years. So our goal is to work with landlords and tenants to be able to get the information out, educate them, and get them to start creating this database of information so that by the time they're offering up leases, I'm hoping, quite honestly, when the landlords start getting a year's worth of information, that they would provide that.
Yeah.
And so on. So as they start getting as much as they can, they would start getting kind of in the habit of doing it.
Yeah, thank you. And then I guess one concern too is that landlords who allow the utilities to be paid separately would just start including that and, maybe overcharging because they have to make sure they're covering so this could force rents up. So that's another part of the concern. But the last thing I'm going to say is, was there a definition of what utility is? Because I saw a few examples in there of what needs to be provided, but I think that probably needs to actually be spelled out. So,
Well, and the reason why we didn't get all the way down the line into every little nuance. So for the most part, we're talking about gas, oil, and electric. Those are the three most popular. Water is usually paid by the property owner. Same thing with sewer. So those are the three that typically are paid as a true utility bill, other than something that would be like cable TV is an optional service. It's not something that we really, don't see as a required utility. Those are mentioned. We get into, but I don't know for a fact that there isn't some oddball out there, or that coming down the line in 3 years, we don't have some other way to heat our house or heat the property. So again, our goal is really those that are required to be able to maintain the property in accordance with the code.
okay. So I think that would just be helpful if that was spelled out, because water, if water isn't included, that really could be an unexpectedly high item too. So if that's going to be included, I think that needs to be added as a definition.
Okay.
That would be a comment. And I'll go to Patty first, because I see her hand up.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, I actually didn't have a problem with this to begin with. I sort of like the whole education piece for both landlords and tenants to learn about electricity rates and how you get to choose who provides your electricity, whether it's somebody green or somebody not so green. So I actually kind of like this whole idea, to be honest with you. But I do agree with you, Lisa, about spelling out utilities or having a clear definition of what's considered a utility, because I think the generation behind me would think of internet as a utility too. So I think it is really something that should be spelled out clearly.
Thank you. Okay, other comments and questions? Yep, go ahead.
Well, I would like to discuss the inclusion of the clause that the borough includes with the board. We had briefly touched on last time. It's found in the document that is included in your agenda. It's found on page 149. And it deals with the concept of visitability. This concept was, I was educated on this concept by a resident of the township who helped me understand that as somebody who is in a wheelchair, she is unable to visit a lot of people. And that opened my eyes to this as a thing that home designers grapple with. You know, how a building is designed relates directly to accessibility. So the clause that's included, if I understand it correctly, and well, you can correct me because you're the implementer of this document, so you would know. As I read it, it states that the scope is that the requirements of section 317 visibility, as I understand it, that's the borough's section. Visibility applies to 1 and 2 family dwellings that receive a building permit under the UCC of PA for initial construction after the 30th day of September 2017, back when this was being adopted at that time, that are also intended for a rental housing permit under the code. And so 2 places that I can think of that this would be relative to if they were both in the borough would be the cottages at Tolls and I believe it's called the Retreat behind what is or used to be the Weiss. I think it's still the Weiss. That area in a cottage type style. That is my understanding. Based on what is written here, that would be where it would apply. And then if you look at what it's referencing, a quick search online can bring that up for any supervisors that would want to take a look at that. Now, the borough has adopted this and it's been in practice 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 6 years. And it refers to this document, section 1105, type C, visitable units. And back when I was on, I think I was chair of the Public Safety Committee at that time, we talked very, very briefly as a region about the kinds of units, the assignment of letters to different levels of accessibility for units. The C level is a certain level of accessibility. There are A through E, I believe, maybe an F. Nope, not A through E.
There's accessible units, A's, B's, and C's.
A's, B's, and C's, so just A, B, C's, no F's. Okay, so this is the C, is what they point to. And if I understand correctly, the C is the lower level of accessibility, not the highest level in general layperson terms?
Is that correct, if I may?
Yeah.
So what this provides for
Thank you.
in commercial buildings, so we're talking about multifamily housing, there is provision under the building code for accessibility in the buildings as well as accessible units, typically type A units, and then most units are built as type B units. B units are convertible. Most designers do not jump all the way to the fully accessible unit piece, but they are required under the code to go to a type A and a given number of them. type C units are considered visitable. This provides that somebody with mobility issues can get in the front door or in a door, and that there is provision for them to be able to get and use a restroom in the building. So an example is, you would be able to get in the front door of a single-family home if it was built as visitable, and there would be a half bath on the first floor that was large enough under the code for them to be able to use. So that the idea is they can come and go into the unit and feel that they can gain access to the unit. This was put in place, and this only applies to those units that are declared when they come in for their building permit that they are going to become a rental unit. So 1 and 2 family homes, townhomes, et cetera, that are not normally under the building code but are under their residential code, this would kick in if they are declared that they're going to be a rental.
Thank you so much, Walt, for explaining that so wonderfully. And so I think it's a very progressive. I think in terms of code, it is a more progressive policy. And I think that it would be an opportune time to consider this. And so I'd like to hear board members' thoughts on that. And maybe questions for Walt, if you had any questions. I've had this understanding for many years, ever since that person educated me, and then I sought to educate myself. And so I don't have a lot of questions, so maybe other board members do for Walt.
So with this, so it says for building, dwellings that receive a building permit for initial construction after 2017, so it would be for new construction?
Correct. So,
Okay.
for example, because this, so we would leave the language as is because the borough has it and has had it since that date. But obviously, it couldn't take effect. So if this document went into effect on August 1 of this year, and Ferguson has adopted this provision, then if you came in on August 2nd, or let's say August 1st, because it would go into effect on August 1st, if you came in August 1st and said, I'm building a single-family home that's going to be a rental, you tell me that the day you bring it in, or anytime before you get your certificate of occupancy, you tell me it's going to be a rental, then at that point in time, this will kick in.
It's a narrower field that it's not,
This isn't applying to, you decide you're building your house and it's going to have to be visitable. This is, you are declaring either before construction or during construction, so before you get a certificate of occupancy, that this is going to be a rental unit. Then this would kick in.
Thanks, that was my only question. Other board members' questions on this item? I don't see any.
I would make a motion if people are interested in considering it, if that's, I don't know what your trajectory of this conversation is in terms of the chair.
Chair, all I need, quite honestly, is direction. I don't need a motion, because you'll take care of that when you actually do your public hearing and adoption. I just need, effectively, you as chair to tell me or tell the manager what direction to give me.
Right, so we have the ordinance in the agenda today, and the motion could be to authorize advertisement for the public hearing. So we could make that motion to, I guess we do need a motion to amend what's been presented
Yes.
as the ordinance.
If you would like to make an amendment, then you would need to make the motion for an amendment and then to advertise for authorization for a public hearing.
Yeah, so you can,
If I may?
yeah.
The ordinance anticipates the visitability provisions being in. If you look at the ordinance that I provided, I took the direction based on last time.
I was looking at the.
Yeah, I didn't.
I'm sorry.
Provided with the agenda packet is a copy of the draft ordinance for your consideration. At the public hearing, the board can take action, and without any motion to amend the draft ordinance that's with the agenda packet, what you see is what would be enacted if approved.
Also, Madam Chair, Chair, if I may ask a question back to our discussion of the list. As I'm reading the list, we have noted electricity, natural gas, propane, fuel oil, water, and I would think that the only other thing that we would have in that list that would cover most units at this point in time would be sewer. If you would be happy with that, I can replace the et cetera with sewer, and I don't think any of the other regional partners would be upset with that.
I mean, I think that makes sense, because I think having a defined list would be helpful so that both parties know what they're going to be expected to provide, and there's no guesswork. And like I said, if we're asking for this, I think it makes sense. I think, I absolutely agree with the intention, and water really could be as surprising to some if you have a leak as, the electric. So that, I think providing that while we're doing this, I think that makes sense. Okay, I wanted to get back up in my agenda.
I don't understand.
To find our, because we have the draft ordinance included, and if you click right, it's before the code. So in my long agenda, it's page 61, or sorry, page 60. And
Maybe Walt could help us see where the language is that's been inserted. I'm not seeing it.
It's actually not language that's inserted, it's language that's not inserted.
Removed. You're
So
right,
if
yes.
you look at, and actually if you look at section 317, on page 37 of the draft code document, you'll note that there's a set of brackets behind visibility. You'll note that there's a 1, 4, and a 5. 1 is College Township, is not anticipating, based on what I know right this second, though that may change. 4 is Harris Township, again, I've not been given direction by Harris Township to include. And 5 is Patton Township, again, not been given direction to include. So the fact that there is no notation for Ferguson Township means it will be included.
Okay, so no motion necessary.
Is this, I'm sorry, thank you so much. Is it PDF page 37?
Page 60, if you're looking at the agenda packet from the online version off the
Okay.
website.
Page 60 of the PDF then. Thank you so much. I believe you, but that language is very interesting and very efficient, and so I'm still not at the right place.
Okay, I'm gonna
Yeah.
keep looking for it too, so we'll
I
just,
believe
I mean, I believe you too.
It's just like,
to
I've
see
got
it.
number 60 up here, it's wonderful. I love this, 145, there it is. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah.
Ferguson Township
2.
is a 2.
Thank you so much. So it's page 37 of the internal numbering,
Correct.
Okay.
the internal document numbering.
Okay, so there,
Notice there's no 2.
Thank you.
If you see the footnotes
Got
on the
it.
bottom,
Oh,
the 2 indicates that it would be
okay,
a Ferguson
perfect,
Township modification or deletion.
perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for showing that to us.
Thank you so much,
We do
Walt.
our
Yeah.
homework,
Not a
but it's
problem. My
like,
pleasure.
I'm
That's-
sorry I
that's
missed
page
this
50 of
1,
my
4, and
copy.
5.
Right,
Yeah,
that's-
thank you. Great.
And apologies to our board
Thanks.
members on Zoom who didn't get the, but
Yeah.
hopefully you were able to figure that out, that that language is included in the code, and Ferguson is not taking that out in our own ordinance or in the code itself, so we're not taking exception to that, so.
Great. So then just for clarity, actually, it's like people have to actively remove that.
So what we did when we set up back, the
Yeah.
first edition of this document was in 2010. When we wrote the first edition of this document, combining all the regional ordinances and putting it together,
Yeah.
we came up with a way to be able to, what we believe, elegantly
Yeah.
include the ability for an individual municipality to have modifications or deletions. And so your ordinance eventually will go in the back. You'll see currently your old ordinance is there. but your ordinance will go in the back. If you see a 2 in brackets behind anything, it means it's deleted. If you see a 2A, that means that it was modified and it's sending you to the back to find out what the modification was. So there's been times where a municipality may take exception to a piece of a clause in the code or wants to modify something that for Ferguson Township would be a 2A. An example of one of those that you actually do modify and is in the proposed ordinance, we carried it forward from the last adoption, is the tree requirements. We have that the arborist can do things with the trees. In Ferguson Township, the direction we have previously been given is because of liability transfer and so on, that the Center Region Code Administration does all of the tree piece. You refer it to us, we take care of the actual enforcement of the code piece for you. And so in your portion of that, you have a 2A, and that 2A excludes the arborist from being able to actually use that piece of the code. And that's something that direction, previous board had given us from a direction standpoint. And it's my understanding we're in the same place now. And so that they'll send you back to the ordinance and it says, hey, read the modified section of this. But it allows this to be read cleanly and easily in the field.
Thank you.
That is so elegant and such a wonderful solution to manage all those relationships as a single whole that gives us flexibility, and just really appreciate that. And sounds like it could be a great model for our parks kind of a thing, maybe, I don't know. It's just a thought, but that's great. That's really wonderful.
Did you have anything else?
No, because we don't need a motion.
Right, we
so-
we don't need a motion on that. So any other items, other comments or questions on this? I'm not seeing anything else. I'm, going back to the utilities for a minute, I think how you've explained it really, I appreciated it. It feels like code is ready to work with the tenants and the landlords to make this work, and knows it'll take time to get it going and is going to be watching how it goes. And so if it's just not happening, we can keep looking for better ways to make it easier so that it actually works and provides the intended function here of.
And the great part about it is, quite honestly, if there is a way, and we'll continue to work with West Penn, we'll work with Columbia Gas, if there's a way for the landlord to get the information independent of the tenant, no landlord's going to want to have the tenant giving them that information. So we're going to continue to work on the other side of it.
Yeah.
But again, this was our first step into this, and we'll work with both parties to come up with truly the best solution we possibly can.
Yeah. So I'm hearing flexibility and understanding that it's going to take time to get to the desired result here. So I'm comfortable with it. So if there's nothing else, the motion we can take then is to authorize the advertisement for the public hearing. So if anyone is ready to make that motion.
I'll move the Board of Supervisors move to authorize advertisement for a public hearing on an ordinance to enact the 2023 edition Center County Rental Housing and Building Safety Code.
Okay, is there a second?
This is Patty, a second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? And seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks so much. Well,
My pleasure.
thanks
Thank you
for
your support.
coming again tonight. Okay, up next is the Pine Grove Mills parking study and review of the draft ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances as follows. Chapter 15, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Part 4, General Parking Regulations, Section 403, Parking Prohibited at all times in certain locations. Section 404, parking prohibited in certain locations, certain days and hours, and Section 406, parking time limited in certain locations, certain days and hours. And we'll go back to Mr. Seibert.
Okay. Voila, there we are. Okay, so I have a brief PowerPoint presentation just to help me stay on track. We visited this back in March, I believe, at a work session. And so we've come from that work session, incorporated what we heard, and I'm going to present to you. So again, kind of going back, revisiting what we saw in the mobility study, revisit some of the stuff we talked about at the work session, and then come up with, show you the final parking plan, the ordinance, and the next steps. Again, this is the basis for where we started, going back to the mobility study that was completed by McCormick Taylor, which even stemmed from the small area plan, had a lot of effort that was done with respect to transportation. Coming out of the mobility study, there was a section that dealt with specific recommendations for parking, so that was section G within the report, and it had a number of different specific things with regard to parking recommendations, which we focused on and highlighted. I'm just going to walk through those again real quick to refresh everybody's memory. So the first one was to integrate any new or revised parking into the concept for improvements to the intersection of Pine Grove Road and Nixon Road intersection. So as that project advances, that's a specific recommendation to that project. So that's not something that will be incorporated or discussed this evening. The rest of them are included in the plan. So looking at site distance along Pine Grove Road, particularly they're focusing on the west Pine Grove Road. We looked at the entire corridor of Pine Grove Road from west to east, looking at the actual posted speed, or in one case, the 85th percentile speed, if you recall, at Rosemont Drive, and we'll discuss that as we get to that point. So we did evaluate all the site distance for public streets and locations where we have had complaints of private driveways. We'll touch base on that as well. A marking for the existing parking spaces on Pine Grove Road. Recall we talked about that at the work session, and the board concurred to go with a full box marking format, and that's depicted on the plan. Standardizing of the parking signage, formats, and messaging. This plan incorporates basically all new signs throughout the village of Pine Grove Mills, which would be consistent with the plan that we're presenting. Coordinating ordinance and field postings for parking. We found a number of places where we had ordinances that it weren't posted, and we have places where things were posted but were not ordained. At the end of this project, everything will match and will be consistent. There was parking that was prohibited on the south side of Pine Grove Road except for Sundays. That's one of the ones that was ordained but not posted, so that'll be cleaned up. It was brought up about having more consistent intervals of parking signs along the road, so you'll see that as we go through the drawings as well. We've done that. And then parking regulations on the east side of Water Street. That is included in the plan, and also it was not part of the Pine Grove Mills mobility study, but there was a complaint that had come in afterward about parking on Nixon Road. So we lowered Nixon Road into the project as well, and we'll discuss briefly that. So we've touched on all the elements within the recommendations from the mobility study, again, with the exception of item number 1, which is very specific to any improvements that are made at that Pine Grove Road and Water Street Nixon Road intersection. Just touching on some of the current parking ordinance restrictions. Again, we discussed these at the work session, just as a refresher. So along Pine Grove Road itself, both on the west and east side, there are certain locations where parking is prohibited at all times. But currently there are no prohibitions on either Water Street or Nixon Road, even though we do have some signage on Water Street that says you shouldn't park there. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the parking on the south side of Pine Grove Road, it went from Deepwood Drive to a point 938 feet west of Rosemont. So it gets you about halfway between Water Street and Rosemont Drive. On the south side of the road, you could park there between 8 a.m. and noon if you wanted to. Just there was no signs to tell people they could do that. So that'll be cleaned up. A recommendation from the mobility study was to eliminate that provision. Other restrictions that we saw posted in the field, but there were no ordinance. There is a 30-minute parking on East Pine Grove Road, currently posted down in the vicinity of where Sit Your Art Out is located. So that will be converted to an ordinance, and we talked about changing that from 30 minutes to 2 hours to have a more reasonable period of time for people that are frequenting those businesses. There was a loading zone on Water Street posted, again, no ordinance for that, and then also the parking on Water Street that was posted, no parking, no ordinance, that'll be cleaned up as well. Again, a refresher, just talking about the Pennsylvania Code and what we look to with respect to stopping, standing, and parking restrictions. And you might see highlighted there is that word may, and we've talked about that. It gives us the ability to impose parking restrictions, but it's not a mandate. And so this is what we're utilizing to be able to say, we're going to enforce parking restrictions for site distance, corner site distance at public streets, but not at every private driveway. If you recall, we looked at that. If we did that on Pine Grove Road, there would be basically no on-street parking. We are still allowing for those people who have had issues and concerns, who have complained about parking, they can't see the other driveway. In those locations where it's currently posted as no parking, we're maintaining those. We're not changing those things. So then again, this is kind of the typical section for Pine Grove Road, where we have one lane in each direction and parking along the north side of the road. So again, the plan does update the signing, so everything will be consistent throughout. We talked about the restriction of site distance just for streets or driveways where there have been complaints. We talked about the time restriction change, and we also talked about the paint lines being marked or boxed out. So you can be patient with me here for a minute while I stop share and reshare a PDF. And so now we'll just take a walk down through Pine Grove Mills. This may look familiar, hopefully a little bit to you. There's not as many drawings as there were at the work session. If you recall at the work session, we had the two options, where one we were prohibiting parking at every driveway and the one where we weren't, and this is the one where we don't. So again, starting at the western end, so here's the Ferguson Elementary School, and I'm going to zoom in and we're just going to take a walk. There are places where you can faintly see some signs here. What you see in the red is what we have now as a more consistent interval for signing, and this will be no parking in this section in front of the school on both sides of the road. And again, in front of the school, we're prohibiting parking there so that we have good sight lines getting out of the driveways, as well as limiting parents from wanting to do drop-off and pickup of their students from the street. There is a designated drop-off pickup area on the school property, and that's what we want them to be for the safety of the children. As we continue towards Water Street, this is where we start picking up parking here. And you might notice a symbol here, the symbol I. This is a handicap parking space that's existing out there. That will be maintained. And just again, refreshing, where you see the light green line, that's where this allowed to park now. We were just able to move it a little bit, but that allowed us between here and the other end to pick up another parking space. And then you can see the lines in magenta are where we're going to have the painted stalls going in there. And then that continues. I'm going to start down here, here's the page, for a short distance until we get to Kirk Street, where we have prohibition of parking there, which is relatively consistent with what's out there now. Again, you can see a slight variation in the lines and the number of parking stalls. We picked one up here just to the east of Kirk Street. As we continue towards Water Street and Nixon Road intersection, we were able to pick up a couple more parking spaces as well at this end of the parking zone. And here we were looking at the vehicle turning movements coming off of Water Street, heading to the west, making sure that we had sufficient width there in the lanes for vehicles to make those turns. So we did those, and we were able to pick up a couple more parking spaces there. And again, you'll see these signs that you hear shown in the red are the proposed locations for the parking restrictions there. This will be designated the beginning and the end of the restrictions. And again, to emphasize that those parking stalls will be marked in that location. Moving on to the east on Pine Grove Road. Just off the page here is the intersection of Nixon Road. So again, this is all posted no parking on both sides currently. That's staying. There's a small section in front of a couple of houses here that right now is not prohibited, but with the concerns for sight distance that these people have brought up, that short parking area in front of those two houses will go away. This will all be no parking. There is one space for parking here before we get to, I guess, Thrush Street, again, where we have sight lines that we're trying to maintain. And again, along the south side of the road, that's no parking anytime, all the time. Once we get beyond Thrush Street intersection is where we get to, where currently now you are allowed to park, and you'll see the green and the red. In essence, the red is where there's a driveway, or perhaps there's one location there's a fire hydrant. I think that's this one right here. So you're not allowed to park there by the motor vehicle code. So we're just reflecting that we are gonna mark spaces, but we're not gonna mark them in front of somebody's driveway or in front of a hydrant, essentially maintaining the same amount of parking that's out there right now, but providing the marked stalls. As you move down towards, this is 235 building, this is where the Stitch Your Art Out is, and there's a hair salon in here. This is where we proposed the 2-hour parking in front of this business here, so that's what sign J is, and that continues just down onto the next portion of the street. You'll also notice right here, we have another symbol I, and this will be another designated handicap parking space. And I think we talked about that also at the work session. When we start marking parking spaces on the street, the Americans with Disabilities Act says that for every 25 parking spaces you have, you need to designate one as handicap parking. So this is a location that we picked close to those businesses for a handicap parking space. I'm going to jump to the next sheet then. And this will finish out Pine Grove Road. Again, there's the location of the businesses. Here's where we stop the 2-hour parking restriction. And again, that's just during the day. It's not all day long. I, off the top of my head, don't remember the hours, but we'll get to that in yours. I think we went 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. We'll touch base on that. And that continues until we get down close to Rosemont Drive. And then when we get to Rosemont Drive, again, we have public street and we have our sight lines. This is pretty consistent with what's out there now as you look to the east. That's posted, it was a complaint we had years ago about folks parking so close to Rosemont Drive they couldn't see. We talked about this at the work session. We went out and did another 85th percentile speed to see the speed of vehicles in that vicinity. They're pretty consistent with what they were when we did it before, so the posting isn't really changing to the east. What we found is the cars driving to the east, so if you're looking to the west, looking back towards town, they're also traveling at a relatively high rate of speed. So we have a parking restriction in that direction as well. So in this area where there is currently people can park in front of these houses, this plan removes that parking and it would be up here further away from the intersection to provide that sight line. Okay, and then that's pretty much the end of it for Pine Grove Road. I'm going to jump over to Water Street. And this was a recommendation, pretty basic one, coming out of the mobility study, just post no parking both sides of the road, and that's in essence what the plan reflects. You'll see in here these black lines. This is where it's currently posted no parking. That is not ordained. That will be cleaned up in the ordinance, so that those will be actually enforceable once we're done. And then the last one, which was not part of the mobility study, but was added by request. We do take requests, and that's Nixon Road. And again, Nixon Road, there was concern about parking. The only place that there is a suitable place to park is close to the intersection of Pine Grove Road. There's a small pocket that's offset here that provides additional width that we can fit 2 parking spaces in there, 2 marked parking spaces. I will note, I'll point out, I have seen 3 cars parked there before. With the marked parking stalls, if they do that, it wouldn't be legal, but they could probably still fit in there. But with the minimum size of parking stalls that we meet under the code, we can only designate 2 spaces. So in essence, it may be losing a parking space there. It just depends on the size of the car and how tight folks were parking before. That parking restriction continues for the entire curved section of Nixon Road, which takes us up beyond where the shared use path crossing is. We picked up Sunday Drive also, just to make sure we didn't have folks parking in this vicinity as well, and that leads across the frontage of the park. And I think we talked about this also in the future as that park develops. We're going to provide ample parking in the park, and if we're necessary to discourage it, we can extend that parking zone, or no parking zone, along the frontage of the park if people are just parking along the right side there, blocking the travel lane. So that's a quick walk through the plans, pretty consistent with what we saw before at the work session. I'm going to stop that now and jump back in. Okay, so that was this. The next slide I have is just talking about the ordinance itself. I'm not sure if this even got put in the packet or not, but I do have it with me. So again, the ordinance essentially is going to companion and mirror everything that's on the plan. So the ordinance, though, we'll walk through this, it deletes things from that are currently ordained that are inconsistent, and then we'll add in those to match what the plan is. We're taking out that section about certain days and hours that have been posted. That's the south side where we are allowed to park on Sundays. We're changing that parking time from 30 minutes to 2 hours and actually ordaining it, not just posting it. And then at the end of the day, this ordinance will be consistent with all the proposed on-street signs. All right, jump again. Go to the actual ordinance. Make sure I get the right one. Here we go. So this is the draft ordinance. It's not too long. And again, there are 3 sections of the ordinance that get amended, sections 403, 404, and 406. So section 403 is parking prohibited at all times. And again, as you'll see, there's a number of sections here. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Let me. Hopefully that will help you see it. There are a number of provisions in the ordinance that are going to be deleted because they would conflict with the proposed plan. I'm not going to go through all those, but it does talk about both the north and south sides of Pine Grove Road. Again, there was nothing ordained on Water Street or Nixon Road at this time. And then here's what we're adding back in. So Pine Grove Road on the north side, from Western Deepwood to a point about 95 feet east of Sports Road, which is just beyond the school. That's the section in front of the school. There would be no parking. Again, on the north side of the road, we jump up to Kirk Street, and again, about 95 feet to the west, 90 feet to the east. That's the no parking that we saw at Kirk Street on the north side. We continue then as we get from Nixon Road down to Thrush Street. We talked about that. That's all no parking anytime. And then from a point 70 feet west of Thrush to 85 feet east of Thrush, again, no parking there. So there's just a little bit there. You see that 24 feet to the west of Thrush Street, between the 94-foot mark and the 70-foot mark, we can put a car. Continue on Pine Grove Road on the north side then. The next prohibition is when we get down to Rosemont Drive, and that's 119 feet from the west of Rosemont to 226 to the east of Rosemont. And that covers everything, on the north side of Pine Grove Road. Everything else is legal parking and would be marked. On the south side of Pine Grove Road, it's pretty easy. It's everything. From one end to the other, no parking. So it really kind of cleans the ordinance and makes it easier that way. I took out the clauses for East Pine Grove, West Pine Grove Road. We just made it Pine Grove Road and went with the specific geographic limits. For Nixon Road, on the east side, again, pretty easy. It's all posted, prohibited from Pine Grove Road to 300 feet north of Sunday Drive. And then on the west side, there's a short prohibition just down from Water Street. Then we have a couple of parking spaces. And then from that 104 feet to the end of Sunday Drive, again, there's no parking the entire distance. And then, I'm sorry, I just said Water Street and then Pine Grove Road. And then Water Street, everything from Pine Grove Road back up the hill to Chestnut Street is no parking on both sides of the street. And if I read through that fast and I said something wrong, it wasn't what I meant. What was written here, I apologize for that. I might have done that once or twice. Okay, so that's the first section. The next one talks about parking prohibited certain locations, certain days and hours. So this is a deletion of that. You're allowed to park on the south side of the road on Sundays from 8 to noon. So we're just deleting that provision from the ordinance. There's nothing new going back in there. And then the last section of the ordinance that will be modified is section 406. And this talks about time limit in certain locations, certain days. So again, this is in where we're allowing parking to occur, and this is down there in front of that 235 building where the Stitcher Art Out is located. So Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. there's a 2-hour time limit, just encouraging the ability for people to be able to visit those businesses and have a turnover as opposed to someone parking on the street all the time. And that is a walkthrough of the ordinance. Now, let's see if I do this one more time. And if you ask me to go back and look at these, we can definitely do that. Have to keep adding and dropping them in now. Okay, and I think the only thing I have next is just kind of my final wrap-up slide, so I'll be glad to take questions. We can have some more dialogue. discuss any changes that might need to be made to the plan and the ordinance. I think we captured everything consistent with the dialogue that occurred in March. After that, then, we would look for the board to authorize the advertisement of the public hearing for the ordinance adoption, as well as authorizing us to proceed with the marking plan of the stalls. Once the ordinance is officially adopted, then our Public Works Department will be doing the installation of all the new parking signs and removing all of the conflicting signs. And we would hire our contractor, Alpha Space Control, to do all the marking of the parking stalls. All of that would be laid out in the field by myself and Ryan, so we make sure that they're consistent with where the stalls are getting marked and where the signs are getting placed. Questions for me?
Thank you so much. Questions? We can start in the room here.
Sure, Jeremy.
Jeremy, do you have any comments or questions
No.
on it?
I have a couple, try not to go to others.
We can
You go?
start in the room, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
all right. Okey doke. I got maybe 3 small little detail things and then kind of one general concept idea that's maybe more for the board. So, maybe it's 4 detail things. Okay, so question about the parking spot size that we have. That's in our ordinance, or that's PennDOT, or both?
They're consistent.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the typical stall size is 8 feet wide and 24 feet long for parallel parking. If it's at the beginning or the end of a parking bay, then we can narrow those down to 20 feet instead of 24. So that allowed us to pick up an extra space here or there.
So, like, they don't really talk about, like, whether it's an SUV or a smart car, or, you know, there can be really big differences, but no matter what. So the idea that, like, 3 cars could regularly fit in that area, sorry, it's just a small detail, it really doesn't matter, but they can fit there very easily, and they always do, actually, not just sometimes, but all the time, there's 3 cars there, really. So you then, of course, wonder, like a normal person goes like, seems like if the reality of the world says 3 cars can fit there, why don't the people that regulate the world say 3 cars can fit there? Perhaps that's a PennDOT question, but me thinking about progressive policy, I think, can't we have flexible sizes within reason? Maybe we cannot, because clearly PennDOT has something to say about it, but that was just a thought. The cartway width in various points of the village, it seems to vary. When I'm sitting at the Egg, it seems like that's a really wide cartway compared to when I'm crossing the street, like in the village past the blinker light intersection on 26, right? On the west side of the village. So it seems to me like it's much wider, or somewhat wider at the Egg than it is there. Do you have those cartway numbers that could prove or disprove my perception?
In front of the Naked Egg, I don't have the width down there. The curb section, where we've done this project, it's really...
It seems like if it's about just talking and seeing those really significant gullies and everything, so the budget of 700,000 did sort of match actually invasiveness into those gullies, but we aren't doing that. We aren't widening out into those and stuff.
I don't know about those details yet.
Okay. But it is like $700,000 went to that specific part of that project approximately, and then about 50 for the Chestnut access, I think.
I don't recall, but yeah, the
Okay.
majority of the work is in that direction. Yes.
Thank you.
The only other thing I would point out, just kind of reminding the board members, this is just one project that came out of the mobility study. So there are other projects proposed there for gateway treatments, et cetera, pedestrian enhancements. There are other projects that will hopefully help with some of those concerns too.
Okay, other questions, comments on this for Ron?
Well, I do understand the idea with the parking was for there to be pavement markings for the parking. One thing I do notice, especially in larger cities, is there is no pavement marking. You were mentioning about the flex there earlier, so it does kind of leave a little bit more flexibility that you could put dozens of smart cars or maybe just one or two souped up pickup trucks. So, just to throw that out there.
There is no requirement that says you have to mark the parking stalls. That is purely an option of the board.
As I recollect, that was part of the idea of just providing that visual reduction of the cartway was why we were enthusiastic about that in the past. I don't think that I don't know if Nixon Road was included at that time or not, and I don't know if there's a rule that you have to paint Nixon, the 3 little spots, so we don't have to paint Nixon if we paint 26?
Pine Grove Road and not paint Nixon.
Because it's only 3 spots, and then, 2, and then it would.
And just leave that out, and one of the, along with narrowing the view of the cartway, it was also, helping those businesses and their customers to understand where they're allowed to park and really
There was
clearly.
a lot of people saying,
Yeah.
you can't understand the signs, they're confusing, and so marking the parking spaces will make it very clear. They would be consistent with the signing, so folks would know where they can and cannot park.
Right, so those Nixon Road parking spots don't really play into, what we're trying to
That's
accomplish
easy.
here,
Just
so.
give us that direction.
Yeah, so we
only
could
want to mark
leave-
the stalls on Pine Grove Road, and that's all we'll get done. We still have the same parking restrictions on Nixon Road. We still have the same zone length. We're just not going to tell them how many cars you can fit in there.
Right, and we're not gonna, we're looking for trouble.
Right, I mean, if somebody would park a big, huge SUV right in the middle of that zone, well, you're only get one.
Right.
Yeah, but that's the nature of unmarked parking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, which is the current situation, and that's what we were trying, but
Right.
but this was really, looking at Pine Grove Road, and that the Nixon part just kind of came along afterwards. So unless, there's other concerns on that end, no, I'm seeing nothing from Chief on that, for leaving those unmarked, so, I'd be supportive of that. And I'm looking at Patty and Corey, if you have any comments on this. Any objection to leaving the Nixon Road parking spots unpainted? Seeing no objection there. So, okay.
Yes, again, the requested action is to authorize the advertisement of the ordinance for a public hearing at the next available meeting. If anybody hasn't been in Pine Grove lately, they are paving the road. They would have been done today, but it looks like they'll be done tomorrow. With the paving on Pine Grove Road, and so once all this is done, we'll be in a position that we can start doing the markings and the signing.
Great, okay, good news. Yeah, do you want to make the motion? Just someone. This is for
move-
advertising. for the- yeah.
I'm sorry,
Authorized
my
okay.
llama is now on my screen, my screensaver's, I can't make the motion, but my question was actually, do we need to change it because of the small change? Okay.
No, that's not.
I'm sorry, you said that, okay.
Yeah, it's just whether we're painting them or not.
Gotcha,
It's nothing to
gotcha.
do with the ordinance.
Right. Okay, so if someone wants to make that motion,
I'll move that the Board of Supervisors authorize a public hearing on the ordinance for revised parking regulations in Pine Grove Mills.
okay, anyone care to second?
This is Patty, a second.
Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, moving on to new business. First up is the consent agenda with 2 items. Did anyone care to remove either of those items for discussion? Seeing none, could we get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Consent agenda's approved.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Okay, thanks very much. And next up is a public hearing on a resolution of Ferguson Township, Center County, Pennsylvania, approving the naming of Farmers Way to improve and enhance the response for emergency services personnel for properties located on the private way. And we'll go to Ms. Wargo.
Thank you. All right, so provided with the agenda is a copy of the resolution approving the naming of Farmers Way as a private street. On August 23rd, 2021, the zoning administrator approved of a second single-family residential home to be built on tax parcel 24007-004. This property is zoned rural agriculture and it is approximately 181.3 acres. Resolution 2017-8 designates the Board of Supervisors the authority to approve the naming of lanes, roads, and streets in the township, adhering to the Center County 911 street and road naming criteria when two or more structures are sharing a road. Staff's recommendation is that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution.
Thank you. And this is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing for any comments on this item. And seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
I'll move that the Board of Supervisors adopt a resolution approving the naming of Farmers Way as a private street in Ferguson Township.
Okay, is there a second?
This is Patty, I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on this item? And seeing none, this is a roll call vote.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is a roll call vote for Resolution 2023-2022. Ms. Stevens?
Yes?
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Gracie Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Denneny?
Yes.
Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the vote passes unanimously.
Thank you. Next up is a public hearing on a resolution of Ferguson Township, Center County, Pennsylvania, to authorize the manager to execute the professional service agreement with KCI Technologies, Inc. for Slab Cabin Run Stream Restoration Project, and we'll go to Mr. Modricker.
Thank you. At the regular meeting of the board in April, the board authorized staff to solicit requests for proposals, RFPs, for the preliminary and environmental design for two PRP pollutant reduction plan projects, as Aaron Jolin had described earlier. One is on Slab Cabin Run and one is on Beaver Branch. Tonight, there's two action items, one for each of these, because we solicited requests for proposals for each project. The current budget includes funding for this work. The total design funding available is listed, and we received proposals from 4 companies experienced in this type of work: HRG, Biohabitats, KCI Technology, Inc., and WSP. Staff did evaluate the proposals based on criteria outlined in the request for proposals. Within your packet, you should have the RFP that was sent, the proposal received, and a recommendation letter from our stormwater engineer. And so tonight, staff is asking that the board authorize the manager to execute a professional services agreement with KCI Technology, Inc. for the preliminary design of the MS4 PRP Slab Cabin Run Stream Restoration Project as outlined in the township's RFP and KCI's proposal in the amount of $51,195.04.
All right, thank you. And this is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing for any comment on this item. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
This is Patty. I move that the board authorize the motion just read by Dave Modricker.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I, Mr. Thompson, will second that.
Thank you. Any discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion and a second, and this is a roll call vote.
Yes, this is for Resolution 2023-23. Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Gracie Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Denneny? Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, next up is a public hearing on a resolution of Ferguson Township, Center County, Pennsylvania, to authorize the manager to execute a professional service agreement with KCI Technologies, Inc. for the preliminary design of the Beaver Branch Stream Restoration Project, and we'll go back to Mr. Modricker.
Thank you. And similar to the background and narrative that I just gave you, there are two projects. So this one is the design for the Beaver Branch project. Again, the same firms submitted proposals and were evaluated, and based on criteria, staff's recommending that the Board of Supervisors authorize the manager to execute a professional services agreement with KCI Technology, Inc. for preliminary design of the MS4 PRP Beaver Branch Stream Restoration Project as outlined in the Township RFP, and KCI's proposal in the amount of $47,930.
All right, thank you. And this is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing for comments on this item. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
This is Patty. I move that the board authorize the motion just read by Mr. Modricker.
I, Mr. Thompson, second the motion.
Thank you. Any discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, this is another roll call vote.
Yes, this is for Resolution 2023-24. Mr. Gracie Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Denneny?
Yep.
Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes?
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you. Next is a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, authorizing the township to enter into an agreement with consortium parties to acquire the services of PRI Management Group for Coral Gables, Florida, to provide consulting services related to replacement of the records management system. I'll go to Ms. Martin.
Yes, Madam Chair, actually, this is an item for Chief Petrick to review and discuss with the board.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, provided with the agenda is a copy of the resolution authorizing the township to enter into an agreement between the Regional Records Management Consortium members to acquire services of PRI Management Group of Coral Gables, Florida, to provide consulting services related to the replacement of the current records management system. The current records management system went live in 2019. However, the vendor has not been able to fill contractual obligations regarding the system's functionality and therefore needs to be replaced. The consortium includes the following: State College Borough, Townships of Ferguson and Patton, and Pennsylvania State University. The services provided by PRI Management Group include, and its project management, needs assessment, procurement, implementation, oversight, and closeout support. Total services, $167,400. Ferguson Township share is 12.5% of the consortium group, which is $20,925. Provided with the agenda is a copy of the agreement between the Records Management Consortium and PRI Management Group of Coral Gables, Florida. And the recommendation is to adopt the resolution.
Thank you. Okay, this is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing for comments on this item. And seeing none, I will close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
I, Mr. Thompson, will move that we adopt the resolution.
Is there a second?
This is Patty. I'll second.
Okay, discussion on this item? Yes.
What's the 12.5% based on?
That has been an agreement that has been in place with the consortium for, oh my gosh, many years. Every records management system that we have entered into has that 12.5. Patton also pays 12.5 of the operating systems and maintenance, and that's been in place for probably 10+ years, if not longer.
So Ferguson and Patton each pay 12.5, and then I'm sorry to ask, I have to ask the numbers. Every time we do a regional thing, it's so unique. So this is really interesting because the borough has a police department that contracts for college in Harris, and then there's us, and then there's Patton, and then there's the university. So I'm just, is it based on population served, or is it based on, how does that many years long formula?
It was a formula that was adopted. Penn State University pays 50%, the borough pays 25, and then the rest of the
Gotcha.
25.
We
is-
split.
Yes, yes, and that's been, like I said, in place, and has been approved for probably 10-plus years.
So then Harris Township, we don't cover Half Moon with police, Harris Township and College Township, they don't contribute, then we could make that assumption there,
I can't speak for that.
if that's the 100%, I guess. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, appreciate that.
Okay, other discussion? Okay, seeing none, this is a roll call vote as well.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is for Resolution 2023-25. Ms. Denneny?
Yes.
Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Gracie Griffin?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, next up is a review of the Regional Growth Boundary and Sewer Service Area Implementation Agreement. And we'll go to Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Provided with the agenda is a summary of an overview of the presentation that Mr. Jim May here is prepared to discuss with the board this evening and answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good
Glad to be
evening.
here. I just have a few minutes. I want to run through a presentation, then I have to talk about the growth boundary sewer service area. And kind of a big picture of why we do this, some of the changes that we're proposing, and kind of how we move forward from here. So tonight, what I'm looking for is any comments that the board might have on this, and we will bring this back to the COG, Land Use and Transportation Committee, and the Regional Planning Agency, and then forward it to the General Forum for final action. But I wanted to talk about kind of why we have the Regional Growth Boundary and Sewer Service Area. And it's basically, it was developed after long policy over the past 50 years. If you just look out around us, we've always had more intensive development inside a certain area and been preserving farmland and not extending public sewer and a growth boundary too far out. In 2006, the growth boundary was formally established to direct most development into certain areas in the community. It was also to improve the availability and preservation of farmland, preserve rural communities, utilize our existing infrastructure, not only public sewer, but existing roads, water lines, and that kind of thing, so those extensions were not going on. It was also to help align sewer availability with an adequate capacity at the UAJA, protect source water and other environmentally important resources. And most importantly, it was required to have participation from all 6 center regional municipalities. So if there was anything outside your area that needed environmental protection or quality, water quality protection, all the municipalities were involved in planning for that. I want to talk a little bit about where we are today in terms of the growth boundary and also some of the things that the municipalities have done. Most new building permits are issued inside the growth boundary sewer service area. We do allow growth outside, but it does not have public sewer. Development capacity inside the growth boundary and sewer service area is adequate to serve development for at least the next 20 years. One thing that we always monitor every 5 years at our agency is how much capacity is inside that growth boundary. And that really tells us when we should be expanding holistically and making that larger. UAJA has 10.6 million gallons a day permitted for treatment. They're using about half of that right now. That's a little bit of a function of the growth boundary sewer service area, but obviously other things that are going on at UAJA in terms of improvements and how much water we're using. Source water continues to be protected by having this growth boundary sewer service area, plus municipalities like Ferguson that have
agriculture, zoning that protects agriculture also helps with that as well. The last thing is I wanted to mention that this allows communities like yours in Half Moon Township in particular to preserve their rural areas but still grow where they want to grow. In terms of an assessment of the existing agreement, it's meant to be a fairly rigorous process, so it's not an easy process to go through. It takes some time. There's a lot of information that needs to be provided by the person that wants to expand the growth boundary sewer service area. The last time we updated this, we removed the requirement that required a development of regional impact study inside the growth boundary sewer service area because that's the place we want to grow. So we removed that requirement and allowed those projects that affect multiple municipalities to be approved inside the growth boundary. We continue to maintain two lines, one for a regional growth boundary, which is related to the comprehensive plan, and one for the sewer service area, which is related to the Act 537 plan, but they are contiguous lines, so they're together, so that growth and sewer service is managed together. And finally, we still require that all municipalities stay involved in the process. Another important thing that's remained the same is the initial request for expansion has to come to the host municipality, and there's a local decision that you make as a municipal board or council on whether or not you want that request to move forward. If you don't want it to move forward, it dies at the municipality. If you want it to move forward, it goes into the regional planning process, and then the other municipalities get involved. Also, as I mentioned, all the municipalities participate, and there must be 5 votes in the affirmative to expand the growth boundary sewer service area. In terms of changes, we don't really have any substantial changes in the agreement. We looked at it every 5 years. What we did basically was cleaned up some of the authority language and the effective date, moved some of the exceptions to the front of the agreement, and then we also removed a lot of background information out of the agreement and made another document called the RGB SSA at a glance, which is really an easier way to read about the history and the background and to do that. And that will become an appendix to the agreement as well. So it's been simplified a little bit. The process isn't any simpler, but I think it's a little bit easier to read that agreement now. And finally, a couple other sections were deleted for brevity in the agreement, but essentially it remains the same. One thing that we did was we removed one section called the limited expansion, and we brought back in a provision that allows the municipalities to do an amendment locally if it's 12 acres or less, or 60 dwelling, 60 EDUs or less. So municipalities can do small expansions on their own without coming to the COG General Forum to get regional approval. So in a nutshell, that's what we're proposing. There was a lot of information in your packet on the agreement, and I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you have and address your comments. And as I mentioned, we'll take this back to the COG committee and the regional planning agency, address the comments, and then bring it forward to the general forum in the fall so we can have it submitted by the end of 2023.
Thanks so much. Thanks for presenting that. We've been discussing this and seeing this a lot at the Land Use Committee, and I'd recommend everyone look at that at a glance. It is very helpful, and it looks very nice. And then I just wanted to point out one thing about the individual municipal ability to do that small expansion. So that's a total of, it was either 50 or 60 dwelling units or under 12 acres, but that's within the whole 5 years, right? Okay, so you can only do that within that 5-year period before the agreement's renewed again.
Exactly.
Okay, other questions or comments?
You mean once within that 5-year period?
What, I
No,
think the totality.
In total. That expires every 5 years because we weren't, when we put that in there in 2013, I think it was initially, we thought we wanted to limit it to 5 years to see how many of those expansions we had. And then it had to be It would expire unless it was renewed by the municipalities, and it wasn't renewed the last time around, but we've never had one of those before, so it could be multiple expansions up to 12 acres and 60 dwelling units at different locations
I see.
in a 5-year period.
Got it. Is that sorry, may I ask one? Is that arbitrary, or was that on some data, or it was an
No,
effort?
I think this was really, Patton Township really drove this, and I think they wanted to provide, a little bit more flexibility so they didn't have to go through a lengthy process for a project of a magnitude that probably wouldn't impact adjacent municipalities. Some of those projects are small enough that there really are no regional impacts, so we didn't want to bring it all the way to the general forum to have every municipality participate. All municipalities agreed with that, but nobody ever did that, so. But it's back in case.
Yeah, thanks. I guess the reason I'm asking, I don't know, when I look at our ag easement map that has our regional growth boundary also drawn on it, it hasn't been updated since 2015, so I'm imagining there's more easements on there than were, but for us, for Ferguson Township, it appears that there is not a single parcel that isn't in ASA or preserved that borders the growth boundary.
I haven't looked at your ag security area map, so I'm not.
And I don't know if that's accurate or not, and I know that ASA can be a little interesting, because like part of Harner that's now a Sheets was ASA, and now it's a Sheets, so that's interesting, but, so I know maybe that doesn't dictate, but I guess I'm referring to that clause that's been put back in. I guess I would want to see equal benefit for all municipalities, whereas with Ferguson, it seems like we're not going to really be requesting a whole lot of that based on our ag easements, whereas other municipalities are, and it kind of seems like it would behoove us to have some control over that regionally, because that is going to be increasing our costs of transportation and sewage. So is the hypothesis we're putting it back in? We are putting it back in?
Yes, it's proposed to be back in there, and
Already.
any expansion has to be contiguous with the existing boundary, so it wouldn't be
It would
some
be
isolated area.
well there.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
Got it.
Pine Grove was brought in because it was part of an existing system and
Yeah.
integrated into the UHA system, but
Right.
you wouldn't see that happening now. So.
Thanks.
Other questions for Jim? Or any other comments you want to submit
thanks.
for this?
Many thanks. Oh,
Yeah.
many thanks to you
Yeah.
for the wonderful presentation. So.
Yep. Okay. We can always follow up later if some comments come to you, so.
Yep, just let me know. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much
Okay.
for coming and presenting that. Very
You're
well.
welcome.
Thank you. Okay, next up is a review of the draft ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances as follows. 1, setting a maximum speed limit of 35 miles per hour for eastbound Blue Course Drive between Westwind Drive and Circleville Road. And we'll go to Mr. Seibert or Mr. Modricker?
Mr. Modricker, in lieu of Mr. Seibert. This is an easy one, so I told him I could take care of this. So, in conjunction with the capital improvement project that we have on Blue Course Drive, staff worked with CATA, as you're aware, to relocate a bus stop. So in lieu of installing the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, we're moving the bus stop. One of the concerns that CATA expressed when we moved that bus stop is the speed of vehicles traveling downhill, which would be eastbound on Blue Course Drive from Westwind Drive to Circleville Road. So based on that concern, the township engineer conducted a study along this section of roadway, and it does meet the criteria to be posted at 35 miles an hour, so that's a reduction in speed. So tonight, what's being asked is that the Board of Supervisors authorize the manager to advertise an ordinance for a public hearing to set the maximum speed limit at 35 miles an hour for eastbound Blue Course Drive between Westwind Drive and Circleville Road.
Thank you. Would anyone care to make that motion?
This is Patty Patty, I'll make the motion as read by Mr. Von Ricker.
Okay, is there a second?
I, Mr. Thompson, will second that motion.
Okay, all right, discussion on this item.
I'm just trying to get the map up. I think I'm understanding where this is. It's after the red light at
So
Circle.
if you're at Blue Course, Circleville, T-Berry,
Yep,
at that intersection, the bus stop will be moved just to the west or to the south. The road's on a curve, so it throws you off a little bit if you're using, your northbound or eastbound. So when we move the stop to the far side of the intersection, so the bus will be stopped before the intersection if it's coming down the hill from Westwind Drive, which is that connector at T-Berry. So if you're, I don't know if I've got you oriented right properly yet or not.
I know that intersection, I think it's the Westwood.
And that's the Center Foundation.
Building was right there.
That's Westwood.
So when you're going downhill towards Circleville, that's the section that we're talking about reducing the speed limit because the bus is going to be stopped
Got it.
down at the bottom before the traffic signal. And so we want to make sure we have people slowing down before they get to that stop.
Cool. I've been thinking of a step down there for some time, so. Because
And it's only
people-
eastbound, it
yeah,
wouldn't be the
okay.
other side.
Inward bound, you mean? Like in toward town, in toward North Atherton?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Going the other direction, the speed limit's not affected.
Thanks.
okay, other questions? Comments? I'm not seeing any.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks for all the
Yeah.
efforts and Patty's suggestion that we consider this.
Yeah, thanks very much. Okay, if there's no other
Okay,
discussion.
do we have to have a vote?
Yes, yeah. So we have a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Okay, all right, thanks
Thank
very
you.
much. Okay, and moving on, we have a discussion and consideration on a process for a zoning ordinance amendment and zoning map amendment, and we'll go to Ms. Wargo.
Thank you. Provided on the agenda is draft zoning map amendment to the Village Zoning District in Pine Grove Mills and a memorandum from staff summarizing areas of concern found in Chapter 27 zoning as identified by the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan Advisory Committee. At the March 7, 2023 Board of Supervisors meeting, the board chose to hold the referral of the zoning map amendment until the zoning ordinance text amendment was provided to the board. Areas of concern as identified by the advisory committee include lot sizes, uses, shared parking regulations and requirements, and landscaping and buffer yard requirements. The board is asked to discuss the proposed request for a zoning amendment and determine how staff should proceed with recommendations from the advisory committee.
Okay, thanks very much. And I need to flip back to my notes and my agenda. Thanks, and we did see this before, Small Area Plan Advisory Committee discussed it. And so, it's a big change, and we discussed this before when it was here in front of us. And so, I'd be interested in looking at a process where we're able to move these kinds of things forward that come out of the advisory committee. So, that could be a part of the discussion. I would like to see this at a work session. I think that would be helpful to see this in the context of the quick views and allowable heights, uses, and that kind of thing, so we know what we're talking about and able to send it then to Planning Commission with some context. So I have, and one other thing that did have me a little bit concerned, just about, I guess, the vastness of the rezoning request here is, I know when we worked on the small area plan, one of those incremental steps we had talked about was some historic preservation and being able to know that some of those smaller lot buildings and homes be able to be preserved. And I'm a little concerned, and I guess interested in what's been done to move forward on that end, and what could happen with rezoning if there are no protections in place for some of these smaller lots. Could everything be raised and compiled into a bigger lot? So I don't have the quick view, so I'm I guess interested in a broad discussion about it and some of the impacts, but those are kind of my initial thoughts. It is a significant change, so still kind of working through what all those ramifications would be on that, but I know it's part of the small area plan, so I appreciate the work that's been done, and in the interest of progressing it, I'm trying to look for some different steps in carrying on the conversation. So
could you elaborate a little bit about on the concern about the historic preservation vulnerability, I guess?
Yeah, I'm not clear on what would happen to the existing structures.
If some of these things that were discussed were implemented?
Yeah, or not. So, because I know part of what we had talked about was looking at, getting, different kind of historic district recognitions done, and, facade preservation looked at and things like that. And I don't know what's been discussed on that end in relation to this. So I guess I'm looking for a little more information on that as well.
So, Madam Chair,
So, yeah.
I would say absolutely we could pull this into a work session for discussion, bring in those quick views that are being requested, and further the conversation in a work session if the board is interested in that.
We talk about it a little bit tonight, or?
Yeah, I think so. And I think getting, a little bit more input from the board and some, some feedback from Jenna too, and see, what kind of discussions there have been on different ends, just putting a little more context around this. And I see Patty's microphone is off too, so I want to go to Patty and then back to Jenna.
Yes, I agree with your points, Lisa, about process, and I would much rather do it at a work session because it is getting late, and I'm sort of tapped out and losing my focus. So I would love to discuss this in a work session and focus on process.
Thank you.
What does it mean to focus on process? I had asked about elaboration of that. What are you guys asking for in the work session? I won't be there. Just out of curiosity, what does it mean to focus on process for this?
Yeah, I think, having something come from the advisory committee and how, what kind of context do we need to send that back to the planning commission with? So what discussions can we have here at the board so that it's placed in front of the planning commission with a direction and with some, materials, the discussion, the history. And so, where are we trying to end up at here? And so I think having, a process where we can take what's been referred and maybe recommended or, suggested by the advisory body and have that place in discussion by the board. And so when planning commission receives it, there's some greater depth to what they're able to do with it.
So you're what I would call is sort of more like our commentary on the concepts that have been put forward, as opposed to like, it goes to here, then there, then here, then there. That's more like what I think about process. You're sort of talking about direction on the thoughts that have been presented?
It could be, and I think it could actually help describe a process too, because I don't know how many things have come out of the advisory committee like this, so it might actually help establish an actual process, but I think for this, I think I am talking about both of those ends.
Gotcha.
I'm looking at the manager too, because I think you might have comment.
Yeah, I think that for a zoning amendment, as part of the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan Advisory Committee, it is in their work plan. It was part of the work that they were to do to review this zoning amendment, specifically as it relates or is applicable to the Pine Grove Mills area. And there's opportunity for another public input meeting perhaps that would focus more on outreach to invite all residents within Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3 to be able to also give input if we're doing a zoning amendment. So I think that's another item that the board might want to consider if you're discussing process, but that of course is up to the board.
So for clarity, you're talking about adding in a public meeting, a township-wide public meeting to review the suggestions of the small area planning committee? Is that the thought that someone has?
I would suggest that it would be an opportunity for residents in the township to be able to give input on specifically as it relates to the zoning amendment that was opened up for discussion for the board. We would just want to, or excuse me, the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan Advisory Committee. The suggestion really would be focused on not making any changes to the ordinance that could impact the other two wards. And so just being able to give an opportunity for residents to voice their thoughts. A participatory process is certainly an opportunity just to allow folks to review what the township's doing and be able to offer comment. That's just that's a suggestion that the board may want to consider. If you're going to have a further conversation at a future work session, process may also consider a participatory process or methodology for that.
Right.
Is there village zoning is there village zoning in the other wards? I thought that was only in Ward 1 in Rock Spring and, I mean,
Yeah, I
I
think that's
love
it.
me some public input, but this is the village zoning, and is that, have we broadened it somehow? I missed
No,
it?
it's just,
Okay.
it's just those two. And I'm even thinking, properties that are touched by this rezoning and maybe nearby within a certain radius or something, having them engaged at that point for some feedback. Yeah, I would like to see some thorough discussion on this. And I agree with Patty that I'm not sure that that at this point in this meeting, I can give everything I would want to give to this discussion right now. So
Could we have staff clarify a little bit the bullet points so we understand the content? It says lot sizes, but not like increase, decrease, preserve. Can we get a little context on that before we move on?
Yeah, and I appreciate that too. And I think that's, before we go into having this on a work session to I would like to go back into that memo and nitpick, so and add in my very specific questions, which I think are kind of like lot sizes and,
The reason
what
I'm
was
asking
going
is,
into that.
I guess I'm just, my understanding of the history of this was sort of like it's being driven by, there's some serious constraints in Pine Grove Mills that aren't experienced in other areas of the township, and this was really driven by the problems of that particular area, and they're very real problems that people experience and that are holding them back from utilizing their property to the fullest. So I certainly don't disagree with public input across the township, and they're certainly invited to any of the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Planning Committee meetings. So to be super clear, they are not excluded from this process in any way, shape, or form, have been invited by the emails anytime it's been discussed. So just so anybody who's watching doesn't get the idea that this hasn't been an inclusive process, it has. And the reason it was started is because a lot of those property owners there that don't live on suburban lots, that are very large, that have lawns, et cetera, they're very constrained by the zoning there in ways that is really a kind of a de facto taking, really. So while I appreciate the need for the board to understand the changes that are being proposed, they came from the village. They're a very robust process and was all public and all inclusive. And so, you know, I wouldn't think that we should wind this out so much so, because that's detrimental too to a public. And it's the reason why we started this, embarked on this, wasn't so somebody who has a 2-acre suburban lot, can comment on a lot that's, what is it, like 75 feet by 75 feet, I'm not sure, very small lot that is so constrained. So while they're certainly welcome to comment, that's not the goal of this item. So the goal of this item is to problem solve for that. Now, we did talk about how some of those things, and this was led by staff, are certainly relevant to the TSD, but we're doing a whole work session on that, and they will have, everybody can comment to that too. So, can we talk a little bit about Pine Grove Mills and what was recommended here tonight while it's on the agenda, and get some sort of a context for what's been presented, lot sizes, uses? I see you say add some things. I was at some of these conversations, so I have context, maybe the board members don't. Landscaping buffer yard requirements, right now they're, 30 feet? 15? Is that reducing it? Do they compare, right? So.
I think Jen is looking to answer some of those things.
Get some context on some of these and understand then maybe, does it really apply to other areas of the township, or is it a little bit exclusive to this area and maybe the TSD? Thanks.
So Jenna, if you want to speak to just those bullet points in the narrative.
Yeah, sure. So after, I'd say planning and zoning staff full-time taking on this committee, it's very clear that the individuals that were put on this committee, their expertise is their community. They hear the stories of their neighbors and business owners and the issues that they have run into trying to make changes on their properties, going through the process of permitting with the township. And that's really where I left this committee, at that 30,000 foot level, at the storytelling level, because having staff hear those stories, that tells me exactly where I need to focus my time on amending the ordinances and what sections that's highlighted in this. There is no draft. There is no draft to the quick views yet. There is no draft to the text. I wanted to leave that to, as I like to say, the subject matter experts, which is staff, it's planning commission, and it's the board, and that is in collaboration with the advisory committee in hopes that they can learn more. Because right now zoning is not a very simple concept to pick up and run with. So really the intent of this was that 30,000 foot level. So lot sizes, that is to establish maximum to preserve those small lots so we don't get consolidations of these historic lots and raising of historic homes. The uses, we want to add schools in the village district, exhibit halls and museums. We've had a lot of requests for people who want to do that, and it's not a permitted use. And then the second floor residences above commercial, we only permit one residence above commercial. So if you think of the corner property across from the gas station, there are, I believe, 5 apartment units above that commercial building as a pre-existing non-conforming use, and that cannot be done again. And that was something that this committee had discussed. Is that something we want to regulate? One dwelling unit above a commercial property along in this area, or do we want to leave it up to building code, that 500 square foot minimum for an apartment, or whatever it may be, to let that dictate that as opposed to our ordinances? Because I believe the overall concern is, in order to have those thriving businesses, you need people. And if we're limiting the amount of units, dwelling units that are in this area, we're not gonna have the people there to support these businesses. And then the shared parking regulations and requirements and landscape and buffer yard requirements that is directly related to the land development plan you're gonna see next. That is how we identify issues with our ordinances. It's based on the modification and waiver requests that we receive for these land development plans. Now, the plan we're gonna see next, this is the only land development plan that we've had in this village zoning district since my time here. It may be quite some time since the last one that we received. And that's really what Planning Commission and staff, we look at, are those modification waiver requests. What are the issues for the area? It is in fact the lot sizes. We have a 15-foot buffer requirement. We have very small lots in this area. It's not going to work. And it may be that there are tools that we are looking at utilizing in the Terrace Streetscape District that can also be utilized in the village. So those are really the big picture topics that this committee identified.
Thanks so much. I want to go to Corey, Patty, Jeremy. Is Patty, any other thoughts on next steps? Or questions about what's been put forward?
No, I'm sorry. As I said, I'm struggling here.
So I said work session, but I mean, theoretically, we could put it on another board meeting agenda with quick views to, really explore the uses and see what is existing in those, the buildings that are identified for rezoning. What are the current uses, that kind of thing. So either way, I think, not knowing our work session schedule right in front of me, and not wanting to put it off for too long, because I want to keep things progressing. So, but I think with a lot of that more detailed information and being able to go back and, like I said, kind of delve into the memo that was attached in here and explore some specific questions and come back with either an agenda item or a work session. I mean, maybe an agenda item is better for an upcoming meeting. So that's where I'm at, and I'm looking to other board members for
Yeah, I wasn't really
movement.
reacting to like the idea of work session. You guys need the time that you need to discuss the concept. I was just trying to understand, there was like kind of talk of process this, that I was trying to understand what had been discussed earlier than the meeting, to try to understand where you all were at, so I could kind of speak to that since I followed the process. So I understand where you all are at, and I heard what staff Jenna had said there, and so how I would approach that, if I were still in that seat, I would probably be just saying like, general direction to me sounds like X, Y, and Z, in order for staff then to bring back those quick looks. So like they've already done so all of this work here, and so like your concept, Chair, of historical preservation, that's when I hear that, I think of that as a 50,000 foot, as Jenna frequently describes it, take on things. So if the board is aligned around that, likely we are, likely the whole township is, preserving historical things while enabling most use of property. I mean, in every one of these, I think that is kind of what you hear, preserve and enable, preserve and enable. So if to get it to the next session, whether it's a work session at your decision or, a board meeting, giving a little bit of feedback to staff about saying like, yeah, these things sound generally good. Let's remember historical preservation when we're talking about lot sizes, and let's remember quality of life when we're talking about uses, And then let's really, shared parking and those buffers and requirements, let's really think of best use of property plus historical preservation. So like you've already said all of these things that are kind of your policy priorities. So those nitty gritty details, you're right, you gotta fine tooth comb them, because they can be very confusing, how they interact together. But in terms of direction, I mean, I think that the conversation that had been had seems like the conversations we regularly have about that village. So I'll leave that at that, and encourage you all to proceed, as you said, with care, but keeping it moving.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that's a reasonable next step and goal, is to bring it back, have the quick views, have identified current uses of the properties and actual lot sizes, that kind of things, and kind of build out what these bulleted points here are requesting. So what specifically about lot sizes, landscaping, buffer yards, and how that would look. I think having a discussion about that and adding that context and narrative around it before it goes to Planning Commission, I think is important. So if we can look at the calendar and get something back on the agenda here before too long, I think that would be a good next step.
And I don't want to complicate things, but I just want to encourage everybody to just consider the value of an overlay, the potential value of an overlay in this area. With your planning commission experience, you could certainly understand that of course could be applied anywhere in the township, as overlays are.
Yeah.
But in terms of preserving current zoning and doing an overlay, that hasn't been mentioned here, but it has been kicked around in the SAP a little bit. But we have a bit more experience with understanding zoning concepts and whatnot. So as you all move forward, you might want to think about that, and when you are giving your direction to Planning Commission, that may be part of the mix that you consider, because what you can do is you can control the negative and allow the positive without worrying about changing your existing zoning. And so it really allows you some creativity without as much of the risk, in my opinion, from what I have seen.
Okay.
And that's something we talked about a long time ago with this. So I think that's a valuable point to bring up in that discussion. Okay, well, good. Anything else on this item?
Well, I understand it hasn't yet gone to planning commission. I was gonna say I would have capacity, it would be nice if there was maybe opportunity as a board to collaborate with planning commission, so. But
Yeah,
whatever direction you take,
And that could be where we end up, is, looking to have a joint meeting like we will for the TSD, and really exploring that. Yeah, I think that might be worthwhile, considering the vastness of what this entails. I think that might actually be very helpful. So, okay, all things to keep on the table.
How many more meetings, work sessions we go through, and then how many more they go through.
Yeah.
It just compounds on Jenna's time and other staff.
Right,
time.
to get together and discuss it.
Bring all the players in the room.
Yep.
When possible.
Yep. Okay, well, very good. Thank you, everyone, for that. And we'll move on to our next item, which is 125 East Pine Grove Road Preliminary Land Development Plan. And Ms. Wargo.
Schaefer Engineering has submitted on behalf of their client the 125 East Pine Grove Road Preliminary Land Development Plan dated October 7, 2022, and last revised May 3rd, 2023. 125 East Pine Grove Road Preliminary Land Development Plan proposes the conversion of a single-family home into a restaurant with indoor and outdoor dining areas. Property is located at 125 East Pine Grove Road, that's 24009A 030, and it's zoned village. This property is approximately 0.537 acres. Staff and Planning Commission has reviewed the proposed plan and is recommending approval with conditions as outlined in my memorandum dated May 31st, 2023. Staff's recommendations that the Board of Supervisors approve the 125 East Pine Grove Road preliminary land development plan with conditions.
All right, thank you. And we can have discussion first on this item. Any comments, questions, discussion? Seeing none. Would someone care to make a motion?
I, Mr. Thompson, will move that the Board of Supervisors approve the 125 East Pine Grove Road preliminary land development plan with conditions as outlined in the Planning Director's memorandum dated May 31st, 2023.
Okay, is there a second?
Second, Laura.
Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Okay, thank you. And next is communications to the board.
Yes, got many compliments from residents on our services and staff, and had a lot of questions. It was on election day. Good place to meet a lot of residents is on election day, so just wanted to pass the word around and just thank everyone that's all engaged in the process and what's happening in their community.
Nice to hear. Yes, Patty?
I had a communication from a resident about the bulk waste pickup. Maybe more of a complaint about some of the rules. In the end, it did get resolved and the items were picked up, so, but I did have that communication.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Not seeing any. We'll go to calendar items, and there are a number of upcoming meetings listed. And if there is nothing else, looking around, nobody has anything else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And I'll second, and we're adjourned. Thank you.
Good night, thank you.
Good night.
Dabba-dabba-doo.
Their travels, I hope everything goes